want to commit to reconciliation, the wrongs of our past. But by also saying you're proud of your country doesn't huge trauma in the past. So it's a bit surprising how the terrible events of recent weeks is leading some people to say we've got to sort of tear the country down. I think we recommit to the country, we build it up.
Nobody said
and we show
that.
we're going to fix
problems
with our past. We're going to make the country more inclusive. We're going to tackle
I served in the army, so you better listen to me.
My commitment.
I've seen you don't.
I'm really
proud
of this country. I do think we're the greatest in the world. We're not perfect, but I think we should be really proud to be Canadian.
So are you ready for an election?
Canadians
I'm an opposition leader, John, that won in the middle of the pandemic.
Sedentary lifestyle.
It's been impossible to tour. I've been trying to do everything we can virtually, and so we're ready to go whenever we need to go. I think it's completely selfish of Mr. Trudeau to try and put his own political skin ahead of the economic rebuilding, the mental health challenges coming out of the pandemic. Now that we're reaching vaccination, as he led a race to the polls as his first act, it's pretty shameful, but we have to be ready. It's a minority parliament, and I think
he said it'd be
Canadians
September or whatever, which means
always
just in time for the election.
Always focused on cover-up and entitlement, and I'm going to offer a different vision. A kid from the suburbs of Toronto that's thought to work hard, serve the country, and
hey, what the fuck did you just say?
Well, let's pick up on that because, again, you started to list a number of things, but where are the Liberals particularly vulnerable in your assessment?
Well, there's no plan for economic recovery post-COVID, John. We have $500 billion worth of debt that's been accumulated and a budget that just showed he's on the credit card, so to speak. There's inflation risk, there's a housing crisis, and we've got the highest unemployment rate of the G7 out of the countries we compare ourselves to.
What are you
we
talking
spent
about?
the most, and we have the most at risk. And the only growth in our economy in the last year has been housing, which is now pricing people out in the GTA, and resources, which is what Mr. Trudeau's been trying to dismantle for the last few years. So I want to get people back to work, whether it's the small business owner in Mississauga.
He's been trying to dismantle. He fucking spent $4.5 billion to buy a $500 million project for some reason.
In Hamilton or Sault Ste. Marie.
In order to sell gas to the Chinese off of boats from a facility that doesn't exist to a facility that doesn't exist on boats that don't exist. First, he's got to kill off them Indians, so he sent 10,000 RCMP.
You know, what really will move the needle here, because as I sit in the catbird seat, we invariably talk about these things on a daily basis.
Residential schools.
Issues keep coming up. Some, are incessant, but the fact that the vaccine rollout, for example, was one issue that seemed to resonate. A lot of people were disturbed that we weren't keeping pace with the US of A, but now it seems like we've eclipsed them on both first and second doses. Do you think the vaccine rollout still is a sore point for which you can point to the Liberals and their shortcomings in that regard? Do you think that still has resonance?
As soon as they started talking about people legally spying on your home security cameras?
Preparedness plans will be in the future, rebuilding capacity that Mr. Trudeau's eliminated. He fought with the pharmaceutical sector.
And it took them 4 fucking minutes to lock the machine up and fuck up.
Reinstating the pandemic warning system. Canada had the best pandemic warning system in the world, and the Trudeau government shut it down 1 year before this capacity, making sure we're more self-sufficient in it. To criminal or to critical.
And when I mentioned that they're doing, it's just magically it happens more. Wow.
We were slow at the border. We were slow on vaccines.
High, buddy.
Mr. Trudeau still hasn't explained why he tried to partner with a communist China state-owned enterprise for our vaccine. That was another boneheaded move by the government in the pandemic. So we have to learn these lessons, and I put forward a plan to show we will be prepared in the future.
Talk about much.
That's the Canada Emergency Preparedness Act. You're saying it needs an upgrade, and you put that forward today. But
Canada First Defense Strategy. Canada First Defense Strategy.
There are issues like taking the Speaker to court, who's a Liberal, Anthony Rota, or even the fact that there's no Governor General. It hasn't been for a while now.
So,
are these the kinds of things that Canadians care about? Do you believe that the rank and file? If you go on the hustings in and around the GTA, you think these things resonate?
Local purchase.
Well, our major focus is Canada Recovery Plan. We put it a 5-pillar plan, 1 million jobs in 1 year, anti-corruption measures, a national approach for mental health, a mental health action plan, self-sufficiency as a country, bringing back some jobs and capacity, and the fifth fiscal situation in control. over the course of the next decade. So those are our 5 priorities, John.
Talk about
but
the
we
full
also
moon
will
and everything that happened the last 4 days, you cocksuckers.
Entitlement and cover-up, whether, as you said, it's the Governor General, whether it's the Canadian Armed Forces. There's been a cover-up of sexual misconduct allegations for 3 years in Mr. Trudeau's
Governor General, Prime Minister. Who else?
The We Charity, SNC-Lavalin, and he puts his friends and insiders always before regular Canadians, and that's what we're going to be holding up, an option that is focused on securing
little old
jobs
ladies can leave their houses because there's no puddles
and having an ethical prime minister. You know, the first one from the GTA ever, if I'm successful, John. So I hope people give a look to the Conservative Party. We're ready to get the country back on track.
All right. As far as fielding a full slate of candidates, has that already been arrived at, or you've got riding associations still going to select these candidates?
But how fucking old are you?
We're moving this up because Mr. Trudeau has been posturing for an election. He'll probably finally fill the Governor General spot shortly. So we've been accelerating some of our nominations. We're accelerating.
Well, he recommends the person to the Queen.
Pandemic preparedness piece today. We're going to be ready if it comes in August, as is the speculation, and we're going to have some incredible candidates. Our Conservative Party will reflect the Canada of 2021, a cross-section of people from all backgrounds, all faiths, all orientations. We're a big blue tent.
We're not racist. Look, we got a black guy and a Chinese guy, and he's one guy.
Our economic recovery to make sure Canada leads the world in job growth.
Oh, fuck. Do they really? Imagine if they really do. If that person really exists, I don't mean nothing by that, I swear.
And other parts of the pandemic.
With Aaron O'Toole. All right, so you're saying the speculation is August. That would be the actual election date, or he would call an election at that point?
Well, we're hearing the speculation that he would call it by that point. You know, we have had to be ready since literally the first few hours I won the leadership job. There was speculation of an election last fall, then this spring. Mr. Trudeau wants to use the pandemic to hide the fact that they don't have a post-pandemic plan for getting people back to work. They don't have a plan to deal with the housing crisis.
Motherfucker, if it was up to you.
His spending, if inflation continues to go up, John, and interest rates increase, there's going to be a huge reckoning in terms of the debt he's accumulated and some of the housing shocks Canadians will face. So we need to make sure we kickstart our economy, including natural resources, which the Liberals and the NDP and all the parties on the left don't support.
Yes,
you know, the NDP were supporting the Shutdown Canada movement, the illegal rail blockades before COVID. So we tend to be the parties fighting for working Canadians.
They started this conversation talking about residential schools. We're not bad people. And
unions and union leaders.
What did you just fucking say?
We want to get everyone working.
Who's in the armed forces and the jails?
Our country will be strong.
What about climate? It's a big deal in the 905, as well as Toronto proper. Now, you've come up with a climate plan, but it seemed somewhat, I guess to some of us anyway, confusing. Are you planning to refine that further or communicate it more clearly? What's the latest on the climate plan?
And then when they see how you treat us
and
what you say about us,
the time to get a plan that will get our emissions down. I've said we're going to meet our Paris commitments, but we're going to keep a focus on creating jobs and bringing investment to Canada. So we do price carbon. That was the shock for people. But we don't have a tax. What we're proposing to the provinces, John, is the pricing would be kept with the consumer to make purchase decisions. So they keep their own money. It would just have to be used.
Some shit about coming out with a
carbon emission lowering purchases, whether for their business, their farm, their household.
All cars by 2035 will be electric, because that's the solution.
Trudeau's carbon tax in court. What we've said is, here's another way we can make our.
By the way, Canada absorbs more carbon dioxide than we emit. So fuck your Accords.
Getting our emissions down.
You drive Accords
let's make sure our primary focus is keeping the economy moving and working. So our plan was modeled. It's pretty dynamic. Mr. Trudeau is really worried that the Conservatives are taking climate change seriously, because he's changed his own targets twice since we launched our plan. And his only approach is taxing people. That's not our approach. But if the provinces can meet their targets without this federal approach in terms of the personal low carbon savings account, we're open to work with the provinces too.
So Canadian politics, he's trying to appeal to four, 5, 6 different disparate groups of people.
Speaking of which, Omar Alghabra, the Liberal minister in charge, says by 2035, 100% of all the vehicles in Canada, manufactured in Canada, will be zero emission. Sound like a reasonable target? Could you see yourself going along with something of a similar line?
Well, we launched in our climate change policy. It had many parts to it. We had an EV standard in there, John. It was more along what BC and Quebec are doing, which is a more gradual phase in, working with industry, using the light duty vehicle standard, getting it up to a 30% fleet over the next 5 years
Well, why base it on percentages? What about absolute numbers? You're not thinking communist enough, sir.
And I was just talking to Toyota. They just opened a distribution center in Bowmanville, in my riding. We have to make sure there's enough supply of batteries to meet some of these targets.
No shit, stupid.
The Liberal ministers can announce whatever they want.
You can't buy that.
There's no plan to actually deliver it.
Yeah, there's not. Trudeau has never delivered you can't fucking do it.
On his deficit pledges, on taxes, on jobs, on safe drinking water, on Indigenous reserves. He's never made a promise that he made to Canadians.
First Nations
My
or
approach
Indians.
is making sure you have a plan.
The fucking legal
term
is Indian reservation.
You deliver. That's how I think we'll restore some trust of Canadians and their government after it's been eroded after countless Liberal scandals.
If it's Indigenous, how is it a reserve? Hold on a second. What did you just call it?
Today, and Bill C-10, this is the changes to the Broadcasting Act. Was that passed? Did they send it back? What is the status of C-10, or has it died on the order paper?
My buddy had a C-10.
Well, if we go to an election, it'll die on the order paper. As you know, it was only the Conservatives that fought against C-10 and Mr. Trudeau's last-minute change to try and regulate people's free speech on social media.
Like K5500s and Dodge Ram 5500s.
And this is, again, the NDP and the Greens, the Bloc,
the biggest pickup truck in the parking lot.
Approach on C-10. You can level the playing field for our artists and content creators. I'm really actually proud of our content creators. You can support a level playing field with the American web giants without starting to police people's social media through the CRTC. I think it was a ridiculous suggestion.
Hold on. Let's not get into this. The Liberals are never. That was two separate fucking attacks they're making on our civil liberties.
They're going to send it to committee, and the committee won't meet again until September. So if Trudeau puts his election first, C-10 will die in the order paper, which I think is good because it was really an assault on what people's freedoms on the internet, what they expect to see with their social media.
Sounds to me then it's dead on arrival.
Getting things delivered out to the fucking middle of nowhere.
As you prepare your loins for the election to be called, by your estimation, it'll be sometime in August. Aaron O'Toole, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, the official opposition. Wish you the best. I thank you for your time.
Sometimes the only way to buy shit is to order it off the internet.
Thanks, John. Look forward to speaking again.
Things like that. A lot of times that means you're not paying the sales.
We'll get to our panel topics worthy of discussion just moments away. 22 past right now to the roads. We go in a check of chopper traffic. Ari Rabinovich.
Well, John, we got these big problems on the go in Oshawa. I've been here for several hours, and it's going to be several more by the looks of it. Eastbound 401 at Simcoe Street. That's where you're forced to exit the highway, and that's causing a delay on the East 401 from the 412 in particular. And the delays on the alternate routes are also steep. So make sure to use any alternates that you can as soon as possible. Try using eastbound Dundas for now. Looks a little bit better than eastbound Kingston Road. You're also going to find that there's a delay as you make your way towards the on-ramps here because the ramps to the East 401 from Simcoe Street and Stevenson are all closed. You can only rejoin at Ritson. On the South 404 past the 407, we have that emergency road work once again. Right lanes are blocked and a delay from approaching Highway 7. New collision in Vaughan northbound. The 400 is at Rutherford where the right lane is blocked. And then there's a delay on the approach from just north of Langstaff. Gourmet Fins at Pizza. Fresh dough, hand-pressed thin, and topped with fresh veggies, goat cheese, and pesto sauce. 10-inch pesto amore, just $8.49 at Pizza. I'm Ari Urbanovich, Global News Radio, 640 Toronto, Chopper Traffic.
I am so sorry. I should have said
air conditioner breakdowns are unexpected. You can expect Reliance Home Comfort to fix it fast. We're here to take your call 24/7 while keeping your safety our priority. And if you do need a new AC, right now you can get our featured air conditioners with no...
So every time they install one of these things, they're working with R410A, which causes heart attacks. Oh, I don't know why these people attack our network like this. Like it matters. Like anything I'm doing here matters. So as soon as they started talking about the security cameras, nothing but problems. Okay. Well, they didn't get into nothing too important. I don't remember. This guy probably podcasts or whatever. I wonder how many people are calling the city right now. I don't want to buy. That's the big thing you interrupted me calling the city to report backed up storm drains. Wow. These people honking like they got somewhere important to go. That's okay.
Officials say the hybrid approach is hurting education. Will students and teachers be back in the classroom full time? Tonight on Global News at 5:30 and 6.
If you have knee pain and you're worried about how long it takes to see a specialist, here's good news from Dr. Lou Nally. Working with a knee clinic, Dr. Lou offers immediate referral to the specialist or orthopedic surgeon and is covered by OHIP. Call help.
Don't miss the Pinpoint Health Show with Dr. Lou every Saturday morning at 11. Call 1-855-55-DR-LOU or pinpointhealth.ca.
Hey, it's your Ford vehicle.
This ad's
to hit the road, but I could use a little Ford service time first. You know, some expert hands going over my body, checking under the hood. Yeah, I'm talking the works, baby.
Get your Ford ready with the works for only $99.95, including oil and filter change, vehicle report card, 80.
Researchers is Piercarlo Vadasolo at Claremont McKenna College. He says awe is the feeling that occurs when you encounter something unexpected, unexplainable, vast, and extraordinary.
You see something that you perhaps haven't noticed before, and you realize there's a lot more to it than you previously had thought.
It's
almost like you're peering into a world that you hadn't seen before. Something is opening up to you.
You can be looking at something.
So there's these columns in the newspapers. You probably have one where you live too, like the Fix It, Mr. Fixes some shit. Like there's something fucked up in your neighborhood that the city ain't dealing with. And they'll take pictures and write about it and call the city 50 times. And so it's not our responsibility, it's somebody else's. There's places in the city where there's like a pipe with electrical wires coming out of it. And nobody knows what the fuck it's for. Nobody, like no level of government or private property owner has any idea what it's for. The people that live there 25, 30 years already, and the people that own the whole house before them owned it up like back in the 40s and 50s. Where'd this pipe with wires come from? Nobody knows. I see things marked with railroad markings. Nowhere near the fucking railroad. I have no idea. This city, we still have
Activation.
We have payphones, wireless towers, the high tension wires, the high voltage transmission wires. What else? Air raid sirens. I'm not even joking. We have air raid sirens powered by Chrysler V8 engines. That's real. Those exist. They're in the city. I could show you where one is because it's close enough to the ground you can see it. They're not all at the top of buildings. We got sewers that are 150 years old. There's
to be able to make those emotions.
And what I'm finding out, I know they wired this whole city with fiber optic cables, or as much as needed it, back around 1999 through 2001. They did the whole fucking city, or they did everything that mattered. Now they're running them up on the phone wires, on the phone poles, I should say. They're just zip tying them to the wires that are already up there. They're tying them to fucking trees and shit just randomly all over the fucking place. And there's these boxes that look like Wi-Fi routers popping up everywhere. They got two antennas sticking out of them. But I'm finding boxes with red flashing lights on them I never noticed before.
Enjoy.
And so the big flat brown metal boxes are telephone wires. They got these new ones all over the fucking place popping up just in the middle of fucking anywhere. They're called fiber optic nodes. And there'll be 5G soon enough. Just wait for it. They'll all be paid for by China somehow.
Then we can celebrate that we are still that great place to live and that we have what it takes to work to heal the wounds and the blisters of our history and move forward together. Yeah, I think it's worth celebrating.
Well, there you go. A great nation confronts its own truths, as uncomfortable as they may be. So would you concur with that one, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Aaron's a great guy. I hope he wins. But let's just focus on the,
So are we having an election?
Left-wing politicians out there who are calling for the end of Canada, or at least the candidate shouldn't be celebrating this year. I mean, this is just more performance leadership, right? Now, there in 2020 there were 69 homicides, 38 shootings, 35 of which were from the black community. The shooters were majority.
Hey, watch out! If I get shot, they'll list it as white.
Where
what it says on the police
BLM
computer
and
for
those
some
people
fucking reason.
calling for that we shouldn't be celebrating Canada Day? Where are they in crying about the black-on-black violence in the city of Toronto? In 2020, the murder rate in the Indigenous community was 8.6% higher than the non-Indigenous community. There are boil water rises over. How is canceling Canada Day, or for that matter, changing the name of Dundas Street in Toronto, going to be solving the real problems of some of the Indigenous communities and the black communities? And by the way, if I could just point out about Henry Dundas, his criticism is that he said in the bill legislation about banning the slave trade, is he put in the word gradual. And therefore, people are saying that he supported the slave trade, and it's not true. He put in the word gradual because there was a prior piece of legislation which failed, and he was trying to find a compromise in order to end the slave trade. So, but to go back to your question, as John had said, I mean, they're the biggest nationalists.
I'm not sure which guy he's talking about.
Canadian immigrants themselves.
They tried to convince us to take the name Dundas off of Dundas. I wouldn't listen to the Twitter crowd who are calling for the 2 months later, somebody pipes up from one of the schools. Dundas was against slavery.
Last week which said that 69% of people want to see Canada Day. I know I have my flag flying right now outside my house.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned, well, you gave us a background on various other points in history, suggesting that maybe some people cherry-pick to advance their own agendas and narratives. We were talking in the first hour to a professor of history, I guess it was in the second hour, at Trent University. He hosts a podcast, 1867 and all that. He says, this Canada Day, let's cancel the chancellors. But, you know, there was a recognition that historic wrongs were committed
in the media keep talking about cancel culture.
I suppose John
Moraz, the internet, we watch this shit 1,000 times.
Saying this, the education minister in the province said it's important to include Indigenous history now in the curriculum. There's a greater conversation taking place about how that's important for Canadians just in general to know about. Would you say that that's marking progress, and that's another hallmark of a great nation? Again, when I said earlier, confronting our truths, as uncomfortable as they may be.
Invented by Hollywood.
Sure I would, and I think that's part of the process. But I want to remind, I mean, it seems to have been a shock and awe, a wave of shock and awe over people sort of my age, people from 40 and older. Except I never learned about the residential school programs, and I myself knew very little about it. Went to pretty good schools when I was young here in Toronto, and knew nothing about this in any detail until recently.
And you'll still insist that somehow your tax dollars come to us. It's never happened.
Today from India or Somalia or China, or whether they came here 50 years ago from Ukraine or 100 years ago from France or Britain, what everybody knew was we came and took this land by force. There's no new surprise here. We came, we found this land, and in the name of God, and let's face it, financial opportunity was the subtext, but in the name of God and Christendom, France and Britain came to Canada and took every piece of land they could by force at will when they felt like it, in the name of God. And that was the Confederation of Canada.
You're always fucking repeating the part that's not true.
Who didn't know that.
This isn't true, but I'm going to say it 6 times so it sinks into your head.
It was a horrible past. We all knew it was a horrible past. Everybody knew it was a horrible past. You would have to be blind, deaf, dumb to not know that we stole this land. As many countries have been founded by invaders around the world, we stole this land and we kept it. And we never solved the problem with the people from whom we took it.
Where'd you take the land? I'm on the land right now.
The shock and
it's still here. Where did you take it?
Who
are you? I've never heard of you in my life. I've been here this whole fucking time.
John's statements, but I can't
openly occupying the land. It's the same premise as squatters' rights.
I mean, we came here with good intentions. Maybe they weren't the best the way everything was.
You were looking for a place to send your unwanted people to be low-priced laborers and high-priced consumers.
I caution that sort of interpretation of Canadian history. Look, you know, John, first of all, I listened to 1867 and all that. It's a brilliant podcast. I encourage people to find it and listen to it because it gives a real and a very interesting history of Canada.
How would you
know? But to go back to the comment that John
we took it and we kept it. We took it and we kept it. Who'd you take it from?
We committed wrongs.
Our land's
we certainly have to deal with them. I know when I grew up,
claiming everything from North Carolina to Quebec.
The residential school system wasn't covered, so now
China and Russia are backing
my
us.
only concern is that when do we ever actually teach Canadian history? When do we, teach something about ourselves in World War I and World War II and in Korea and in the 1837 rebellion? I'm just concerned that we're constantly teaching the negative aspects of Canadian history and never listening to everyone else.
The whole fucking conversation started with how it's not in the curriculum.
Get sort of the
These white guys just said it's not in their curriculum. Oh, we're always teaching this. No, they don't.
Yeah, well, boy, in the broad sweep of things, over 500 plus years, I guess, since the time of John Cabot, and
we're always teaching the negative, but we never talk about this war and this war and this war. All you know is those 3 wars because that's all they teach in school. You fucking idiot.
We weren't the Spanish conquistadors, or at least our forebears weren't. I mean, they annihilated people. However,
something like 90% of the deaths were from disease. He didn't annihilate anybody.
Wasn't evil incarnate, but rather was trying to reach a compromise. I didn't know that. I didn't know much about him. As a matter of course, now it's just sort of come to light because activists have made it that. 15,000 names on a signature is enough to get the manager at the city of Toronto interested in seeing this as a vote within about a year, and the mayor is also complying or saying that it makes sense.
Undertone? Oh, it's going to go to a vote. That's bad. Anything going to a vote is bad.
Even the town of Dundas, maybe they ought to canvass the folks in that community. Do you think the name deserves to be changed?
I don't know I don't know enough about him as an individual to say, was this guy really an exceptional racist? Was he somebody who embraced, and I would defer to my colleague on the phone, he seems to know more about it, but I would say this. There are towns and cities and burghs and counties named after families of, colonial families of import, wealthy families from France and from Britain, across the country, all of whom came here under the aegis at a time when slaves were used, when they existed, all of whom came, and you say
another false narrative. There's more slaves today than there ever were during the history of the United States.
And pushed them aside to our own economic advantage, whether we did so with good intent. The road to hell is paved with good intent.
Did so with good intent. Yeah, yell it at me and I'll believe it.
Neither here nor there, but
there was no good intent.
Change the name of Dundas Street. I bet you if I spent 2 hours on Google tonight, I could find you 200 other names of cities, streets, and burghs in this country that we would need to change because they're
make it sound so that now all the Quebecois are going to say they just changed 11 place names with the word nigger in them.
John, can I follow up for just a moment on that? I mean, keep in mind, John, that we outlawed slavery in Upper Canada in 1791-92, and that was from Lord Simcoe and William Osgood, who the courts are in Toronto downtown named after William Osgood. He and Simcoe wanted to get rid of slavery in Upper Canada almost about 20 or 30 years before it was banned in England. And the reason why Dundas Street is named after Dundas and why Dundas, the city or the town, is named after Dundas is that Henry Dundas was a personal friend of Simcoe, and it was Simcoe who named it. So there's not a strong connection to Canada, but nonetheless, to say that Dundas was a racist and supported slavery is just a dishonor to him, and it's dishonor, I think, to Simcoe.
The students say he was against slavery.
And I don't think people realize that we got rid of slavery back in 1791 and 1792, and we have a great legal history. As a matter of fact, there were many.
Your country didn't exist yet, but you got rid of slavery. What the fuck are you talking about?
Railway. So, prior to 1792, there were slaves running away from Kentucky. They were coming to Canada, and we weren't sending them back to the United States.
Yes, you were.
So we have a
We
have a tremendous history of dealing with the problems of slavery, and that's not talked about.
They broke something on their way out.
In the broader sweep of things too,
assaulted
Indigenous relations, that's become problematic, but
Canada returned many slaves on the false premise of criminal acts committed in the process of escaping. 17, I don't know what year what that year has to do with anything. I'm not even sure what he's referencing. It was 1837, I believe, for the UK, because they were getting upset that the Dutch were making so much more money than them, which is what it comes down to. And they got real upset when they figured out this Afro-Dutch thing had been happening for a real long time. This is all around this. So Napoleon came to the Netherlands, and we had to all pick last names. Yep. So this last name thing is very artificial anyway. No mention at all of the Book of Negroes, the Black Loyalists, and Africville.
They reached out to and trusted Frank Leo and Associates. Currently,
so what really happened is they noticed we were identifying with the street name of Dundas, because it runs all the fucking way across where we hang out. And a lot of us has walked a good chunk of it, if not all in one stretch. Some of us have covered the entire stretch on foot. Not all at once. It is a long fucking street. Oh, these niggers are getting up to something again. And it's a white guy's name, right? So that's hypothetically, if your name was whatever, Leroy Dundas. They don't know if it's a black guy or a white guy. They don't know for sure. And if you were owned as property as a slave by somebody, it was that person's last name that got you treated either with some respect or no respect at all when you went into town to do whatever the fuck you had to do on their behalf. Because them disrespecting you would be the same as disrespecting that person. It's no different now with the last. They're doing these weird studies where they remove the last names from. They remove the names from resumes or something.
$50,000 indigenous children were taken away to residential schools. They lost their language, culture, traditions, and teachings.
No, you're bragging again.
And thousands of those children.
They didn't, because thousands of them. Now, they keep changing the number on this commercial, this particular piece, this spot. They've played it to like half a dozen different versions. The kids you did that to died. Half of the kids that went to the schools died. So that's why they're not willing to put a number on it anymore. Half of them. So culturally, for whatever reason, it used to be normal to be buried by the church, wasn't it? Right. So, and they're thinking they were doing a good thing by burying these half-breed nigger lovers at the fucking school. But since it's like a virus that's particularly fatal. If it kills everybody it infects, it won't have much of a chance to spread. You didn't take anything away from anybody because most of those kids just died.
A broken paddle? Mom?
Like, you taking their language away from them doesn't pass on to me over here. That's not how that works. You're applying these weird Hitler-type ideas of inheritance and ancestry again.
Divorce can bring out the worst in human behavior. If you're worried about losing your children...
Like the Quebecois, right? Damn it. This is going to be all things considered.
Don't suffer in the process. And that makes him the...
Out of curiosity.
416-868-8168以上優惠有若干條件及時限。
Give us a COVID
交通氣溫由綜合債務服務中心贊助播出，電話647-285-7969。
AM 1540交通 A1。Hello， 大家好，繼續有位 Ty 帶嚟一節交通消息。首先同大家update翻401嘅西行線，因為有幾個路段咧，亦都有呢個壞車同埋交通事故發生㗎。咁第一個就係401。
And you can find them all at Real Canadian Superstore. We're going to make your windows twinkle.
You're fucking
low rise. Slow rise. Drop it. Yeah. Low rise records, baby. SELOWRYZE. Make your MCs praise, bitch, believe me. You can only wish to do the things that we do in 306. Stand up if you feel in the mood. SELOWRYZE. Make your MCs praise, bitch, believe me. You can only wish to do the things that we do in 306. Stand up if you feel in the mood.
They said it was supposed to be the news at 5:30 on this motherfucker. They don't simulcast the record.
United we stand, united we fall. I stay ahead of my game, ahead of my time. I feel the drive in my brain, you feel the force in my lines. This gang make you queen with the envy you roll. Cause every bar I fucking write comes from my soul. I try my hardest just to lace these tracks with such grace. Often question myself just to see if it's a waste.
Jump in the water, speed that flow. Don't go against that flow. Speed that flow,
all the water
jump
drain.
in that water. Speed that flow. Don't go against that flow. Speed that flow, just jump in that water. Speed that flow, just speed that flow. Jump in that water. Speed that flow, just speed that flow. Don't go against it, God. Speed that flow, jump in that water. Yeah. Speed that flow, just speed that flow. Speed that flow. Jump in that water. Speed that flow. Speed that flow. Yeah. Don't go against it. Speed that flow. Speed that flow. Don't go against it. Speed that flow. Jump in that water. Speed that flow.
Slice a piece up in the Dutch pot. Curry chicken on the stove top. Shadow niggas from the stove top. Niggas talk but sending gunshots. Fly Anki sauce from my bitch's hood. The place run down but it's shifting good. Shout out niggas out of drip for it. The shit's way beyond crip blooded. Toronto born and raised. Toronto born and raised. They was never ready every single day. You would be amazed. Living how we live, young niggas grinding stuck up in a maze. Told my nigga Charlie we can get this money, make it different ways. We don't color no shots, we ain't color no bitch. But I got a full clip and I bet it'll rip. I just better with bit, and they get it with kids. You know that I catch niggas. Lift them up, how I bench niggas. Better get back on that defense, nigga. Daddy's gonna rat leave a stench, nigga. I guess we on the offense, Charlie like Jordan.
So some people would think I'm being too paranoid by not picking up the nails and screws anymore, with the condition on my bail saying that no sharp implements. I watched. So this is in the UK, I think it was. They're rousting up homeless people and so forth, and they go through Buddy's shit, and he's got a crack pipe and 24 lighters and all this other shit. And they asked him if he had any sharps, and he said no. And that doesn't just mean needles; means anything sharp. When the police are saying it. And in his blanket somewhere, they found a screw, basically like one of these fucking galvanized fucking, just a regular fucking screw like that long. And the cop takes like 2 minutes to explain that. We just asked him, and he said it's not much, but if in your hand you cut somebody with it, that'll fuck up their eye. If you could lose an eye, you could fucking die from that. So if the average person, the way I do that, the average person can see something like that on TV, then I'm going to be stupid to be trying to pick up all the nails and screws. I'm basically counting them. There's hundreds of them. There's thousands of them. I don't know where they're all fucking coming from. They're in every fucking gutter everywhere. Even though I've been picking them up for a year, there's more. So I got like, this is as much as I get to collect, I guess, for now. But I got like 2-3 cans each of batteries and lead wheel weights.
Or at least should be, the bill that almost passed on the Senate today, whereby he was trying to curtail, he was trying to tell people what they could and could not say on the internet, on social media. Social media, especially.
We got the important part. It almost passed. Thank you.
Let me slow it down. Still full circle, I go around. Never thought my city was a murder town. Rob like a dungeon dragon. Ran from the cops and my pants were hanging. Used to do dirt in a station wagon. Getting locked up in the station flagging. 03, I got to raise the magnum. Bringing out the beast like a Hugh Jackman. Join the team like some new draftsmen. They get the rope like how they do in Hangman.
Jump in the water. Speed that flow. Don't go against that flow. Speed that flow. Speed that flow. Jump in that water. Speed that flow. Don't go against that flow. Speed that flow. Just jump in that water. Yeah. Speed that flow. Just speed that flow. Jump in that water. Speed that flow. Speed that flow. Don't go against it, God. Speed that flow. Jump in that water.
Yeah. Be that flow, just be that flow. Be that flow. Jump with that water, be that flow. Just be that flow. Yeah. Don't go against it, be that flow. Just be that flow. Don't go against it, be that flow. Jump with that water, be that flow.
Black and green bandana, black bandana, black and green bandana, black bandana, black and green bandana, black bandana, black bandana, black and green, black bandana, black bandana.
Got so many rhymes flowing through my brain. I wish that it would stop because it's driving me insane. What does it take to be number one? Jesus, for without him, I know.
Oh damn! I didn't make it to the dinner thing. Oh, too late.
Get it. As a little kid, I was in the kitchen watching work. With the flyers kicks, I was never on no hurt shit. Hit the flyer stitch, I couldn't fuck with no hurt shit. Heavy in gymnastics, cause I had to make that work. Touch niggas living me, fuck niggas kidding me. Break a arm and laugh in your face, and that's the kid in me. Dark clouds surrounding us, you can smell a pound of love. All my niggas came from the bottom, I'm in the ground and up. I fought him like Ashley in traffic, you couldn't pass me. Made my first rock before Drake got shot in the grass. That's about the same time that Teddy got touched too. 2 days later, I got brushed in the lunchroom. Day after that, I came back with a pump that held true. Only paid one red sun, I caused hell too. And don't talk if a nigga gets caught too. Free HS, free Oxford. Not apologetic, why the fuck you think I shot you? Everyone's a blessing, so just watch you flop.
When I pull up on your block,
Niggas know it's G-Lock.
you know I send shots.
Give me that shit top.
When I pull up.
Små oss, Family kann ich fühl mich so frei wie Bob Marley. In einem Film und ich flieg bis zum Mond.
Packing the packages, the water coming disastrous. I'm getting bottles of water and matches cause it's hazardous. Immaculate hate. The Montague versus the capitalist movement and generations and nations are going at it. I'm on the front lines of these perilous times. Confusion binds the minds of world leaders. We need a sign. A ray of hope through this dark cloud of injustice. Motherfuck this city of gold that performing is lusted. Jewel encrusted green beans. Apocalypse. Can't you see the blitz on the radar? Missile hits overconfident. War strategists became the catalyst. Angry capitalists. This dark market's fast. Gotta get it ready, my body is so steady, heart heavy from living so long in these last days. Crusades herself, gotta selling ourselves short, gotta abort lifestyles that ended something. We let the mic breathe, life the dying breeze in need. We feed words that breed hope, maneuver past the greed and lead. We made the eagle fly, we made freedom cry by watching Jim try deceiving the eye. Fucking alibi, we was there on the balcony, a shots blare. My vision was scarred, but we still here. It's something for the people, y'all. Do you remember when Martin had a dream and Bobby had a regiment? It's evident the struggle's on. My thoughts are settling, I gotta play the part. Ain't no other role, I'm better at words and better than revolutionary medicine. I took one pill and the this shit was on ever since. I'm trying to keep an open mind. In the wilderness, I hold a sign. Wisdom is war, and it's open mind. Older minds put me on to wisdom priceless. The fight opposite the whirlwind till you're lifeless. Look, the game plans to defeat the man. Fuck trying to beat the man. I navigate seas and to freedom land. Get at me, people, if you're trying to soothe the pain. But if not, move over, cause I'm trying to see change. It's the raven that never came back to the ark, hanging out with the viper after God, and they eating that anger the God. So who you really?
This is the least amount of prog we've encountered recording a song so far.
Coming out the wood, I'm a tough motherfucker. Slumming with the sword, I'm a rough motherfucker. They don't wanna catch me at my best, but at my worst. And that's exactly why I gotta put them in the dirt. You should see us go to work. Watch me hit them where it hurts. Watch me fucking hit them first. Watch me put them in a hearse. Drinking blood to quench my thirst. Catch a charge with that reverse. This Uchiha kinda.
So those homicide and shooting numbers the guy was pointing out are the lowest they've been in a long time. These same cocksuckers last year. How come all the black people are now protesting in Canada like they are in the U.S.? Well, the ones in the U.S. are getting shot at for some reason and hit by cars and all this shit. And we didn't want to get COVID and die. Really, that's we can protest later. If we can't protest later, we get sick and die. So.
FTP across my shit. Yeah, fuck the population, fuck your life and occupation. I'ma watch you run away.
So there's been less shootings as murders, but the shootings that have happened have been fucking crazy. Like fucking hundreds of rounds dumped into like 2 people and shit like that. Little kids getting hit at birthday parties and shit. For 1-year-old's first birthday party. Now think 10 or 15 years from now, the situation all those kids are gonna be in. Just think. Use your fucking imagination.
Like immigration, same grubby sweater since high school. Drugs out the vial, on fire, for more screens and vials. Survival of the fittest, I'm a walking pandemic. Try to take on me and do the jogging man with it. What's a champion scene without some sadness up in it? I know the world is ours, I'm just having a minute. Another dead man walking with a casket incentive. It's either a bucket or a habit I'm kicking. Conscience roll caller, is it cast in auditions? If you notice I ain't present, it's cause the past isn't finished.
Coming for the throat of anyone that is my enemy. Listen, little bitch, this is not what I pretend to be. Send an army, send your troops, send them in with camo suits. Come and catch me, make me pay. Ward boy till my dying day. Ward boy till my dying day. Ward boy being sealed away. Ward boy after I decay. I'm a fucking misfit with this fucking wrist slit. Hit you with my fist, bitch. Bring it red like Christmas. Death is on my wish list.
They said headphones ain't tangled, then it's lost. Punk ass AirPods, if they ain't listening, it's their loss. No cap, no strings attached, fucking weird flaws. Down Jones crash, how we share flaws. Give the empathy in my epitaph. Epithet, you're my nemesis. Yeah, I said that with emphasis. Ain't no common ground or no common sense. Fuck your comments, that's the consequence when you on the fence. Killing will, all my haters will, I can't call them off. I can't call it dog. Shit, I'm probably wrong. Stay lifted and twisted like a fucking polygon. If you feeling froggy, get knocked back to a polywall.
Swear you'll see the black dove, so don't push no more. When it comes to push and shove, I'll put you through the floor. Someone come and catch some smoke, I swear you'll be the one to choke. When I'm fucking angry, bitch, I'ma wipe out all your hope. I'ma smoke your fucking dope, cut you up like cantaloupe. Send you to the North Pole, inside of an envelope. Bloody up my swords again, demons always play pretend. Cut them up with just a pen, I'm something you can't comprehend. Against me you cannot defend, pain and fear you can't prevent. I'll make sure you feel suspense, put you under the cement. Put you in the ground, we're talking down to a nihilist. Taking all these chemicals, I feel like I'm a scientist. Breaking my appliances, anger with the sciences. That is what my style is, and evil is my stylist.
How you smoking Percy's and flip jacks on the lighter thief. If you like the green shit, go full circle like a reef. Ain't scary, Nixon, Katy Perry, Zayden, Jerry, aviary, then low. Watch me blow, dead and buried, let the revolutionary. I've been shaking very. The pen should make the paper move, both are stationary. Kids sleep in my bed since he was up there. Got me fucked up, choosing tough love for the cynic. Basic ass living for a heart that's acidic. How am I supposed to judge it?
Everybody's got their classes there. Maybe they wanted the Corvette.
Okay, all right. Imputing something to her character was
class resentment.
But the idea is she shouldn't be to blame because you should be able to enjoy the fruits of your own labor and have it safeguarded just within society as a natural rule. John Mraz, former Liberal War Room Director, Sam Goldstein, criminal defense lawyer. Guys, we'll have to do it again real soon. Excellent engagement here this afternoon. Appreciate it all. Today, another great Report Talk Radio. Thank you, my technical operator, David Spargala, Michael Downey. And to you, stay safe, stay healthy, stay away. Back tomorrow after 3. Have a good night.
He didn't build Vancouver on an Indian reservation. Half of Vancouver's built on an Indian reservation. So the city is, exists at the whim of the province, and the Indian reservations fall under federal jurisdiction.
To reopen tonight, for owners, it's a time for optimism, but it's also a time of intense frustration. We'll explain why.
That's the two classes, owners and workers.
British Columbia, unmasked. That province is making major moves tonight aimed at loosening COVID restrictions. So what about Ontario? What's going to happen here? We have a report on that coming up.
We're going to have a cholera
also, torrential downpour, a truly incredible amount of rain fell across the GTA in a very short period of time. Anthony Farnell explains how it happened and what's next in our weather forecast.
This is Global Toronto.
Global
news at 6
What the fuck?
Right
what does that mean?
Topping our news at 6 tonight. Step 2 begins just 6 hours from now in Ontario. A very important move for businesses across the province, finally allowed to reopen. But this is also a time of frustration for those promised financial aid from the province. Our Sean O'Shea explains.
Tropical drinks. Everybody knows us for our unique cocktails.
Andrew Korla gets ready to serve customers for the first time in a long time.
Today's our grand opening tomorrow. Finally, we've been closed since December.
He and the owner of Miss Things Hawaiian Restaurant still patiently hoping for promised financial aid from the Ontario government. This Queen Street West eatery lost 85% of its revenue since the pandemic began. The takeout model didn't work, so it closed. Stores can reopen in malls this week.
We have some entities that have been closed over 200, well over 200 days since the beginning of the pandemic.
Businesses hoping for a surge in spending.
Really critical for kind of like apparel, footwear, accessories. Those businesses have been pretty negatively affected. They tend to all be in malls. There's been changes in consumer behavior.
And many businesses that qualify for Ontario government financial aid, $40,000 worth, are getting no answers, and worse, no money.
Well, I'm a sole proprietor. I'm a business owner, and it would help me to reopen my business this year, which is what I plan to do if I'm allowed to do so.
Dance studio owner Laura Beglin qualifies for that money, but the government hasn't paid up. It's a common story.
Well, we don't know what the holdup is. You know, we need to survive somehow.
It's a holdup.
Survival in the days and weeks ahead would be easier if the money came through. In Laura Beglin's case, she likely can't do business before step 3. The province's promises haven't materialized.
And I have yet to see that support. You know, Doug Ford, the ministers were saying that we should be supporting they support small business owners, and I don't see that support.
We're live outside Vaughan Mills. There are many, many small businesses that have not received that promised Ontario government assistance, which has made the shutdown for them so much worse. The road gets a little bit easier tomorrow. At least it does.
Wasn't that your priority 2 years ago to stamp out bootleg DVDs?
Okay, Sean, thank you. Now, masks, they become part of our daily lives. The problem, or you probably, I should say, is you probably have some in your car. Maybe you have some in your purse. But is it time to relax rules around face coverings? While we're seeing a major shift out west, masks are being brought back elsewhere.
It's 48
Let's bring in our Erica Vella for that story. Erica.
So far, we know that masks can be a little uncomfortable, but they have been a certain line of defense when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as more people get fully vaccinated, there's questions as to what the future will look like and if masks will be included. Today, we learned that BC will drop its mandatory mask policy for indoor public spaces starting July 1st. Masks will still be recommended, but they won't be mandated. Now, this is happening as we continue to see the Delta variant circulate and mask policies are being reinstated in some places. For example, it's something that's happening in Los Angeles County. The public health department there is recommending everyone wears masks regardless of their vaccination status. This is something that's also being echoed by the World Health Organization as well. Now, here in Ontario, we are just hours away from entering into step 2 of our reopening, but masks are still very much required when you're indoors in public settings. I spoke with Dr. Isaac Bogosh, and he says there will come a time when we see mask mandates lifted, even here in Ontario.
Usually close, crowded, confined settings, often with no masks, and of course often with poor ventilation. So it should come to no one's surprise if there are a rise in cases when masks aren't worn in indoor settings, especially in a period of time where we have a lot of us vaccinated, but certainly not enough. At some point, we will end up lifting mask mandates, and we're going to see exactly what we see in other parts of the world. Like, there's no magic to this whatsoever. Those who aren't vaccinated are going to be disproportionately impacted by the virus.
Now, last week we did see guidance come out from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and today we heard from the Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Barbara Yaffe, who says there will be Ontario-specific guidelines coming out in the future, but what is unclear is if that will include any details around masks and in indoor public settings. I'm going to send it back to you. Farah?
Okay, Erica, thank you. Now, it is the news many families across the province have been waiting for. After more than a year of loss and heartache, families will soon be able to visit loved ones inside long-term care homes. Kamala Kamali is breaking down the new rules for LTCs.
Former Finance Minister Rod Phillips walked up to the podium for the first time since rejoining cabinet, the heavily burdened role as Minister of Long-Term Care in the midst of a pandemic that has resulted in thousands of Ontario LTC residents' deaths. But he opened with something his predecessor never had, an apology for what has heavily been criticized as a broken and failed system.
Successive governments, including this one, failed residents, they failed families, and they failed our staff. And on behalf of both past governments and the current government, I apologize for that.
Phillips also announced the loosening of restrictions within homes. Starting Wednesday, July 7th, residents at long-term care homes will be able to have outdoor visits of up to 10 people. For indoor visits, residents can have up to 2 visitors and 2 caregivers. Personal care services like haircuts can resume. Cohorting of residents can be relaxed during outdoor activities. When it comes to step 3 restrictions, which could come into effect in late July, residents would have no limits to the number of visitors to the homes. Buffet and family-style dining will be allowed. Residents can also take part in off-site excursions and resume activities like singing and dancing. But step 3 doesn't sound like it'll happen any earlier than late July, 21 days after the transition to step 2.
We need that 21 days to be able to understand the impact of opening on our communities. As I said, because we never want to take a step backwards. We only want to be moving forwards.
Meanwhile, the minister hinted at new long-term care legislation coming in the fall that will make providers more accountable. Advocates say they'll believe it when they see it.
It was a surprise for us to hear that the system is under review, and the question will be, what do they put in it, and who are they listening to? Because it is certainly a surprise to advocates.
Now, when it comes to why the science table is giving that 21-day gap between step 2 and step 3, well, Dr. Moore did say that there is a major concern of that Delta variant spreading, Farah, and today he also gave some very dire figures and numbers saying that it's growing at a faster rate than ever. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. And he said stage 3, or rather step 3, is not necessarily a guarantee. Back over to you.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that, Camille.
Interesting.
Today marks the final day of a bizarre and challenging school year. And while there may be a feeling of relief for both parents and students, there's a lot of uncertainty heading into the fall.
6 to 1 reproductive rate.
Okay, let's go, mister.
A lot has changed since Cara Dawson's son was last in the classroom.
You're a new pair of shoes that aren't going to fit anymore because it's been several months.
As kids came to pick up their belongings, Madeleine August Roberts brought a flower for her teacher.
Because I think it was really hard for her to do this whole online school.
You shouldn't be giving her anything. You shouldn't be exchanging anything you don't have to.
Years old, though, that have outstanding violations, and 24 or 4 stories or higher, and they're being prioritized for inspection. Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine-Cava says the county is cracking down on violators.
Just last night, our building officer notified one of those properties, a building in Northeast Dade, that 4 balconies must be immediately closed to residents due to safety conditions.
How concerned are you finding people living in those older high-rise buildings?
Well, I think many people are. Miami Beach's City Commission held a meeting last night to discuss the steps they're taking to ensure the condos are safe. They're also doing emergency inspections there. One commissioner said he's heard concerns from elderly residents, especially in subsidized housing. But Miami Beach's city manager says inspectors have checked those buildings and they're safe.
You have subsidized housing in Florida? I gotta check this
NPR's
out.
Greg Allen in Miami. Thank you, Greg.
How old do I have to be?
As COVID-19 cases rise in Africa, there is added urgency to get more Africans vaccinated. So far, less than 2% of the population is fully immunized against the virus. The lack of vaccines has been the biggest barrier to getting shots into African arms, but there are other challenges as well, including keeping doses cold. NPR's Jason Beaubien reports from Sierra Leone.
In the capital, Freetown, the parking lot of the Ministry of Health's medical supplies warehouse is littered with broken down vehicles. Abandoned ambulances donated by China and Japan sit with their doors splayed open. 4x4s list on flat tires, cars coated in dust or strewn willy-nilly. But at the back of the
I'd actually like to see the pictures, because the way you assholes describe vehicles never describes what I need to know.
Refrigerators and freezers beep and hum.
So for the routine immunization, vaccines, and the COVID, this is where we keep them.
Senge Momo is the assistant logistics officer.
70 people were arrested. They're facing a total of 346 charges, and in addition, 61 vehicles have been impounded and 57 licenses suspended.
These groups were highly organized, focused on illegally taking over intersections, rearranging street races, and stunt demonstrations for hundreds of attendees at locations across the GTA. They even
you call it the GTA? You wonder why they act like this?
Prevent us from enforcing the law.
Police across the GTA have launched Project Erase, which stands for Eliminating Racing Activities on Streets Everywhere. Anyone witnessing street racing or stunt driving is urged to call police.
You probably got a friend that says he went to Toronto one time and they stole my damn car. Probably.
And the criticism over what the Ford government did when it took office.
Going to the Ministry of Labor for severance advice.
Parts of the country. Sierra Leone has one of the lowest rates of electrification in the world.
I give a fuck with that. I give a fuck about the water issue.
Power, and the rate
I don't need
drops
electricity
down
to bring
about
you water.
6% in rural parts of the country, according to the World Bank. And the issue isn't just limited to Sierra Leone. Across sub-Saharan Africa, 60% of healthcare facilities lack electricity. President Biden this month announced plans to ship 500 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine to the 100 lowest income countries in the world.
Why don't you send it in refrigerated containers and let them keep the refrigerated containers? They run on diesel fuel.
For many African countries to integrate Pfizer into
the
their
ones with electric batteries and shit.
It's definitely
a power supply. You guys are
gesture
dickheads.
by President Biden, but we do have to think about everything else along the supply chain of how do you keep those vaccines at the right temperature
without giving you refrigeration
and
equipment.
then having people access them regardless of.
So my grandfather actually sold freezers to a guy that shipped them to Africa.
Refrigerators is helping to preserve vaccines that need to be kept just about freezing. Rather than store electricity in batteries to power them through the night, these so-called direct drive systems store coldness. They're so efficient and so well insulated that they can stay cold for 3 days, even if the solar panels aren't supplying power.
That's a Coleman cooler
the
right
lack
there.
of batteries makes them far simpler to operate and maintain. UNICEF and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, started rolling them out in parts of Africa in 2017, primarily to store vaccines for childhood immunization programs.
Because you're just shipping them with a gigantic ice pack.
Any of the gasoline or whatever, electricity, particularly for our country.
Safa Kamara, an immunization officer,
but you won't just send them a traditional refrigerated container and let them
these new direct drive fridges.
It'd be cheaper than bringing it back.
Solar refrigerators to,
it costs more to bring it back empty.
The hardest areas, the most difficult communities, and immunize the children.
The
which immunizations? He might be talking about totally different ones.
Facilities across Sierra Leone that doesn't have electricity. Mariama Karoma runs the clinic and shows me the main waiting room.
Here is our under five clinic.
She says at times they have to deliver babies by flashlight, but they do have a solar fridge for their vaccines.
All the vaccines that we are supposed to use in Sierra Leone, we have it here. Only the hepatitis vaccine, we don't have it. We don't have a rabies vaccine. But the one that is for children, we have it.
And she's able to store those vaccines for routine childhood immunizations on site in the solar fridge. Sierra Leone is in the early stages of doing COVID vaccinations. So far, only a tiny portion of the population has been immunized, and the limited COVID doses haven't yet been distributed to small clinics like this one.
Such a heavy focus.
2 p.m. on Global News Radio, 640 Toronto.
That was that podcast, 13 hours or something.
The federal government is getting blowback tonight for part of its school curriculum. It's now incorporating Indigenous issues for elementary and high school students, but it's also facing tough questions for what it did to the curriculum when it first took office 3 years ago. Morgan Campbell explains.
Every fucking
government does. The province has started rewriting portions of the mandatory curriculum for both elementary school and high school students. That work started back in February. Ontario's Minister of Education says the Ford government has been consulting and working with Indigenous leaders on a new curriculum.
So that young people have a better understanding of the culture, history, language, diversity that exists.
But the move has been met with backlash. In 2018, the Ford government canceled Indigenous curriculum writing sessions started by the Wynne government.
We wasted 3 years already. We could have been learning about the real history because the change is within our children.
The current curriculum teaches about First Nation, Métis, and Inuit perspectives, cultures, contributions, and histories. But the mandatory content applies only in grades 4 to 6 in social studies and in history for grades 7, 8, and 10, with no limited number of hours expected to be spent on Indigenous material.
There are very specific curriculum expectations that the teachers are following, and within those expectations there is a lot of room for people to include what they want,
meaning more Indigenous content. Susan Dion has dedicated her adult life to helping shape and study Indigenous curriculums. She also did consulting work for the Ministry of Education leading up to the 2018 cancellation of the rewrites.
We need to understand our different worldviews and learn, to respect the difference and appreciate and care for each other. That's certainly not been, our experience as Indigenous people.
There are calls to implement multiple strategies in classrooms.
We were in the portable with a black teacher.
We have a checklist of here's your courses and then everything else doesn't count. There's so many different voices that Indigenous people contribute to in various subjects.
The province says Indigenous leaders and stakeholders will help to craft and rewrite the curriculum to better reflect lived experiences. Morgan Campbell, Global News.
It has already been a very active severe weather day, and once again, the city of Toronto surrounding areas under a severe thunderstorm warning. Coming up, we'll talk about where these storms are headed, who's getting flooding, and is there any end in sight? Your forecast
falling out of the sky, splatting down, and then
this summer, discover your wilder side in the Subaru. Symmetrical full-time all-wheel drive lets you explore the wilderness with your pack, finding a trail that leads to a better view of the full moon. Because let's face it, nothing gets you back to nature like a Subaru. Legendary Subaru box engine also gives you greater power on any road. Enjoy Enjoy great rates from 0.5% when you shop safely at the Adventure On event at your Subaru.
Somebody was desperate enough
Every
to
day,
do that
more and more
job.
people across Ontario are receiving their COVID-19 vaccines.
I wonder who
Health
paid for
Canada
this.
approved vaccines are conveniently available in hospitals, doctors' offices, pharmacies, and mass vaccination sites. And every dose brings us closer to what we've missed. So join millions of Ontarians. Do your part and get your shot. Visit ontario.ca/bookvaccine. Paid for by the Government of Ontario.
Oh.
I use a CPAP for my snoring and sleep apnea, though I can't use it while I'm camping.
Don't go camping. You got people here complaining they can't bring their electronics to go camping. Why are you going camping?
DentalSnoringSolutions.ca. Call 416-224-9998. That's 224-9998.
I'm Dr. Les Premer, and I'd like to give you and your family a good night's sleep.
So, our mortgage approval is done?
Great news. The bank has approved you at a 1.55% rate.
What the what? That's way too high. Butler Mortgage is 1.15%.
Well, it cannot be the same as our bank's mortgage.
It's totally the same.
That is
5-year
ludicrous, 'cause
variable
the
rate,
rates are
same
so low.
features, no fees. 1.15%.
1.5
I'm switching
is
to
too
Butler
high.
Mortgage. Enough of making the banks rich.
License number 12118, high ratio variable rate, APR 1.16%.
Patio season is here.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Elsa Chang.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. The trial began today for the man who admitted killing 5 employees of the Capital Gazette newspaper in Annapolis, Maryland 3 years ago. Jared Ramos says he was insane at the time of the shootings. Reporter Dominique Marie Benessi from member station WAMU is with us from the courthouse in Annapolis. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ari.
So the defense lawyer for 41-year-old Jared Ramos needs to prove that he was not criminally responsible during the attack. Do you have a sense of how the team will try to do that?
Right. So the defense is trying to build a case that Ramos' mental health issues stem back at least 8 years before the shooting took place. They say in the years prior to the shooting, Ramos was terminated from his job, estranged from his divorced parents and younger sister, and they never really had any meaningful relationships or romantic relationships with another person. When Ramos did try to form a relationship with a high school acquaintance via Facebook, she filed a stalking charge against him. A court found Ramos guilty of that stalking charge, and he was put on probation. A reporter from the Capital Gazette wrote an article entitled "Jared Just Wants to Be Your Friend." Ramos filed a defamation suit, but the case was thrown out. And so to Ramos, that was the last blow. According to the defense, he believed that his reputation had been tarnished, and the world thought he was delusional, and he blamed the Gazette's reporting and the Maryland court system for that.
Was there ever an actual diagnosis of mental illness?
Yeah, in fact, doctors with the defense and prosecution say at some point in time, Ramos has shown signs of multiple mental health illnesses like delusional disorder. It's also known as paranoid disorder, in which a person doesn't know reality from what is imagined. It often manifests itself in an unshakable belief in things that are not true. The defense is trying to prove that he killed these Gazette employees because of the disorders.
Okay, so that's where the defense is coming from. The prosecution is going to attempt to prove that he is criminally responsible and understood the consequences.
Be at the game on Friday, Farah, but I think those prices may change. We'll see how tomorrow goes, but game 3 and then game 6, those ones.
That once the defense has concluded their case. However, what we know from discovery in various hearings before the trial, it seems like the prosecution would try to look at motive and Ramos's attack being methodical, planned, calculated for at least 2 years prior.
And do you have a sense of the evidence that they're going to be presenting?
Right, because the defense is showing that the mental health disorders stem back years, and the prosecution is trying to show this was a planned, methodical attack, they're using the same evidence to argue 2 opposing views. One to say that he had a mental defect, and the other to say he did not. And there's a lot of evidence to sift through. For example, a lifetime membership to the Chess Federation that he purchased just 4 days before the shooting that the defense says he could use to pass the time in jail, a greeting card and a CD sent to the newspaper reporter who previously wrote the story on Ramos, and the CD was full of photos from inside the newspaper offices and articles from the paper's editor-in-chief about when the paper's editorial board meetings would be taking place. A motion was also sent to the Court of Appeals by Ramos to reopen the defamation case, which explicitly says that the Court of Appeals failed to do their job and that he intends to kill everyone at the newspaper. And finally, a note inside the handle of his 12-gauge shotgun quoting Terry Nichols, the 1995 Oklahoma City bomber.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
That's Dominique Maria Benessi from member station WAMU at the courthouse in Annapolis. Thank you.
Thanks, Ari.
50 years ago this summer, an eccentric candy mogul first sang one of the sweetest, most memorable movie songs of all time.
Or two, we're making a run at 50 degrees Celsius. Never thought I'd see that in Canada, and that'll be another story for the days ahead. But severe weather is what we're tracking here, and as we get a little bit closer, I'm going to show you that there are still some watches and warnings, so make sure you get inside. Lightning strikes are always a concern. Even if you don't have the wind gusts knocking down trees, lightning can kill as well. So tomorrow, risk of thunderstorms, and then it's definitely going to improve after that as we start to see more in the way of sunshine later this week. So Canada Day, some improving weather. Here's your forecast. I'll go through this quickly tonight, and then tomorrow still warm, still the risk of rain, and those rain showers can leave a mark. They can cause some flooding. 29 degrees around Toronto. Over the next 3 days, Thursday and Friday, both 23. Unfortunately, looking wet heading through the long weekend. This same pattern continues, Farah, and that'll be right into early next week. But there will be times to get out onto a patio, and Global News wants to make that a little easier for you.
Summer patio season is finally here, and Global News can help you support your favorite local patio with a $200 gift card. Tonight's summer patio contest clue is ice cream. Go to globalnews.ca/Toronto and click.
Because of Gene Wilder's performance, and as people got to know the film better, they became...
Soll dich ehrlich beschreiben, du bist toll, es fällt dir nur schwer, das zu zeigen. Und ob wir beide häufig streiten? Nee.
How are you helping support the local business? The local business donates that to the... They don't buy that from the local business. That $200 card is going to be absorbed by somebody. You're not supporting shit.
About your mortgage too. Come on, try it with us. Mortgage.
Wie lebenslanger Urlaub im Bürgerkrieg. Ich glaub, ich sollte besser lieb zu dir sein. Du bist nicht dick, nein, deine Jeans sind gemein. Schatz, bitte, bitte, bitte schlag mich nicht. Egal worum es geht, das war ich nicht. Und ich schwör, wenn du mir wieder meine Nase brichst, dann verlass ich dich, wenn das gestattet ist. Ich hab gedacht, ich sag dir das noch. Schatz, du Arschloch. Ich hoffe, dass du mit deinen Heils auf die Fresse fliegst. Und sag ja, ich hasse Grey's Anatomy. Und natürlich mit meinem Bett.
So at one point today, I set my coffee cup down and walked away, and there was a lid on it. One of these little white motherfuckers. A bunch of them. And when I came back, there was about like a centimeter of water in the cup, even though there was only the small opening. That's a lot of fucking water. That was only over the course of about 15 or 20 minutes.
Wir beide passen gut zusammen. Ich hab Angst und du weißt, wie man nutzen kann. Und ob ich von dir denke, dass du eifersüchtig bist. Aber Schatz, nein, natürlich nicht. Du sagst, Vertrauen ist der Grundstein. Der Privatdetektiv muss zu meinem Schutz sein. Dass ich mit anderen Frauen nicht reden darf, das geht doch. Ja, ich weiß, das geht auch für dich.
This season, Thursday on W Network. Also available. 12 pickup.
Fucking hell. Here we go.
Und es geht weiter wie gewohnt, denn ich hab Angst, dich zu verlieren. Also von deiner Reaktion, ich bleibe bei dir, denn alleine sein ist so. Und davon abgesehen, weißt du, wo ich wohne. Ich hab gedacht, ich sag dir das noch. Schatz, du Arschloch. Ich hoffe, dass du mit deinen Heils auf die Fresse fliegst. Und sag ja, ich hasse Grey's Anatomy. Und natürlich wird mein Sex alleine rumsitzt. Katzenbabys sind nicht süß, die sind unnütz. Ich hab gedacht, ich sag dir das noch. Schatz, du Arschloch. Schatz, du Arschloch. Schatz, du Arschloch. If you have a girl,
So Russia fired warning shots at British ships or something. Britain denies it, but they're going to fill the I think, the Mediterranean full of British vessels now for no reason. Oh, the world's getting interesting. Notice nobody's doing war games this year. There's no war games. There's all sorts of weird troop movements just.
Story of the night. Take a listen. A lifelong Yankee fan finally got her chance on the field decades after being rejected by the team.
On behalf of the entire organization, it would be my great honor for you to join us for our game on Monday, June 28th versus the Los Angeles Angels to serve as our
Tuesday,
honorary
motherfucker.
for the day.
Damn it.
That's the moment Gwen Goldman found out her childhood dream was coming true. Here is the backstory. It began with a letter she penned back in 1961 asking to be a Batgirl for the Yankees. The team responded, telling her she had no place on the dugout. Fast forward 60 years, Gwen's daughter forwarded the denial letter to the team's current GM, and Monday night, the 70-year-old Yankee fan finally made her Batgirl debut.
Coming up to a locker.
And you tell us the day after. Thanks. I don't remember all that.
Ich bin immer auf der Jagd nach Papier wie ein Blockjäger. Vielleicht schlaf ich bei mir oder doch Käse. Packung nach bis zum 4 für Postreter.
Words away also.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Elsa Chang.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Coming up, a new...
And proves it's never too late, you're never too old.
Alternate stories, and that Gen Z, they won't even think twice about it. It'll just be a decision that they can make, and that's totally fine.
Now news.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. President Biden was in La Crosse, Wisconsin this afternoon, touting the economic benefits of a bipartisan infrastructure bill that still fails.
Is wrapped up. Now we got a...
Wir sind Kinder der Straße. Schau, wieder stellt der Richter die Frage. Woher dieses Gift?
All night, as it is going to stretch into a planned overnight on the South 404 from 16th Avenue to approaching Highway 7, where the lanes start to disappear. Also on the North Valley Parkway, we got a right lane blocked with a stall at eastbound QEW at Bronte. There's a crash block in the left lane in the HOV here. Until Wednesday at Rona, get up to $15 off 3.78-liter cans of Seco Evolution and Seco Muse interior paints. Conditions apply at Rona, for those who know. I'm Ari Urbinovich, Global News Radio, 640 Toronto, shopper traffic.
I'm Sarah Ritchie. I'm a reporter for Global News in Halifax.
I'm Ritchie,
I was
Sarah.
working the day everything changed in Nova Scotia last April. My team has spent the last year asking tough questions about how a gunman disguised as a police officer murdered 22 people over 13 hours.
Said it right there.
On our podcast, 13 Hours Inside the Nova Scotia Massacre, we examine this tragedy hour by hour. We're learning there's a lot more to this story. Listen to all 13 episodes now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
The internet.
Addiction is a serious issue, and we take it seriously. Join registered therapist Yona Budd Saturdays at 10 p.m. as he offers to assist you in dealing with addiction, mental health challenges, and more. Road to Recovery with your host, Yona Budd, Saturdays at 10 p.m. only on 640 Toronto. Forget about checking in 3, 4, or 5 times a day. We'll keep you hooked morning to night. We are your news talk leader, 640 Toronto.
Nope. You're not doing that to me. You're not forcing me to hear that over and over.
Our commitment to do better, our commitment to reconciliation. In one of my communities on Canada Day, we had a First Nations chief who would speak about reconciliation. If events don't take place, you can't celebrate and you cannot rededicate your efforts for this country. It's time to build our country up to address reconciliation, to address inequalities, not by canceling celebrations or tearing Canada down, but recommitting to the principles at the core of this country.
Take that music off.
If you don't want to celebrate Canada Day, don't. That's one of the great things about Canada.
We don't have to do things we don't want to do. Alex Pearson with you on this Tuesday, June 29th. Great to have you here along for the ride, and can't say what's going on in your world. I mean, I do love me a good storm. Don't get them often in Toronto. And it's been a day of sunshine, turned to black skies, and sunshine, black skies, and then it unleashes. And now, as I look at my window, it is black skies again. It actually looks like it's
lightning and sunshine at the same time.
We're gearing up for yet another round, and we're definitely going to keep an eye on this weather, because when Toronto gets here, that means regions around us just get absolutely hammered. Just hammered, and already Kitchener-Waterloo dealing with some power outages and these storms.
Fuck them. That's where the Amish are. You should have listened.
Really, really ugly across southwestern Ontario. So we'll hope to keep power and keep you apprised of what Mother Nature is delivering us. I got my email for second shot today. Surprised me. I was notified that come on in, July 1st. I was like, what? July 1st? I don't know when I go July 1st. I ended up getting really sick on my first shot. Really sick after the AstraZeneca. And so I thought, is that really how I want to spend my Canada Day? In the fetal position? So I had no desire.
That's how you were going to end up.
Really sick, if that is what happens. So I called them up and said, can I do this on Friday instead? And they were actually pretty good about it. But it looks like you have to call your pharmacy. So if you want the same shot and you're not looking to switch and mix things up, which I am not looking to, make sure you call the pharmacy.
Why not? You said it's safe.
Because they just assume, I think, that AstraZeneca people want the mRNA. That's what they assumed for me. And I said, no. I'm not mixing it up. And they said, oh, okay, well, we'll put you on this list. A lot of people don't want the shot. So they bumped a lot of people up. So you might get
it's the same story with one little...
But yes, scheduled for Friday. Say a little prayer now. Well, talk about what this Canada Day, though, should look like. Some, of course, as you know, want it canceled in light of the findings of these unmarked graves at the residential schools. Others say it should be a somber reflection of the losses. And others probably won't pay any attention at all to anything, and they'll say, hell, it's a day off, I'm getting drunk. And the great thing about Canada, and there are many great things about this country, is that we can choose to celebrate any which way we like. So why can't we do both? Can we not celebrate what makes us great while observing and reflecting on the flaws? Yes, we can.
The flaws.
I did it last weekend.
Want to celebrate every time you
we were celebrating my brother-in-law's birthday, and so we had all this music playing. The kids were out having fun, and there I sat with a group, pretty large group, where we ended up discussing these horrific findings. And we talked about what it says about Canada, questioning who we are. It was a pretty somber conversation, and yet it was being had while others around us were having fun. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Let me guess.
And
you
most of
walked
this
up to your
group is South
brother-in-law
African,
and
because that's my
started this
extended
conversation.
family. And they came to this country because
went, Jesus
they
Christ,
saw
you have to
Canada
do this
as
today,
compassionate, kind, fair, and also as not corrupt, albeit their opinions on that have changed. Aghast at what they're seeing in Ottawa. But they came here because they thought this is a pretty compassionate, kind country. And so they were shocked. And I think, they raised some questions. Are we as compassionate as we claim? And the point I made, that was, while imperfect, what makes us so unique is that we won't allow this crime to go unpunished. That we will right this wrong. We will admit our wrong. We will learn from mistakes and correct
people that have been dead 100 years. You fucking...
Unlike countries like China,
service. This is what's
who are unapologetic about any of their human rights violations. Other countries that just are okay with this. We are not.
Hey, can you say Mogadishu?
Other countries will justify it. And we only had this conversation because we were together.
The one in Eastern Europe?
And it was a celebration. And so I think a lot of people in this Canada Day, whether you're hoisting a beer, you're playing in the pool, whatever you're doing, will find yourselves probably having some of the same kinds of chats during what is a day to celebrate and chill out and kind of have fun. So for me, I say Canada Day should be what you decide to make it.
The Canadian military runs a helicopter base in Jamaica that trains the Jamaican National Police, who have a nasty habit of killing people.
And if you want to celebrate what makes us a great country, I say have fun. But I think we can do all of that, or we can do none of that, and I think that should be okay too. But why then is it even an issue? Well, it's an issue because we've made it one, right? because it gets political. And Aaron O'Toole was asked by a reporter last week if Canada should be canceled. He was asked this question before the second burial ground was even discovered. He said, no. And he argues, we should be celebrating our achievements while admitting our imperfections. And we shouldn't be in such a rush to cancel what offends us. And now, of course, he's getting in all sorts of trouble because he politicized the issue.
All those kids were killed were imperfections.
He initially was asked the question before this second terrible finding. But he was also asked, he's a politician, he was asked a political question.
It's kind of like when they put one mistake in the weave of a carpet or whatever, because...
And for the record, it appears recent polling on this very issue is in line with O'Toole's feelings. We talked about it on the show last night. Leger polling finds just 14% want Canada Day canceled. The other finding that I thought was quite interesting is that 70%, mainly non-Caucasian people, say we should be waving our flag way more than we do. I thought that was telling. We're not perfect, but we should be pretty darn proud. Hell, I wish there were the same kind of media outrage over Jagmeet Singh's inflammatory comments that he made just a couple of weeks ago when he declared that Canada is a racist country where Muslims are killed every day. He made that statement twice in one day, once in the House, again at the funeral of that murdered Muslim family in London.
Oh, well, why would he say such a crazy thing like that?
On the backs of that murdered family. So, look, I find the outrage is a bit selective. And the way I see this, reconciliation is not going to happen based on what we do or do not do on Canada Day. It's going to happen based on if the government of the day ever puts its words into action. Delivering their promise of getting clean drinking water to First Nations. People who have begged for clean water for decades. What is the holdup? This has been a promise from every politician for decades, but this in particular was something Trudeau ran on. He was going to have no boil water advisories in his first term. They have barely made a dent.
Paperwork on these accounts.
So that is more important than how you're going to celebrate Canada Day.
$2 trillion.
Maybe holding a royal commission. Make that announcement. We'll have a royal commission. We will hold those to account, be it in the church, be it the politicians, be it to those who are alive today. Anyone who took part in these crimes will be called to explain themselves.
Agent that was adopting
Get rid of the Indian Act.
The #1
allow Indigenous people to self-govern. Stop fighting lawsuits launched by residential survivors.
Indian agent.
Rewrite the history books so that we have the whole truth, even the ugly parts. And so that to me is more important than what we do on Canada Day. Sure, put up your orange shirt.
By force. 90% of the deaths
tear down a statue, I guess. Cancel the day or the event. That to me is the easiest thing you can do.
They say there were way more people here. They're not here now, and it was probably disease.
Put your words into action. And by that I mean the politicians who talk way too much,
so I would
and they never actually walk their talk. That's what reconciliation will look like. And it'll take a good long time before we get there. Just some of my views.
Speaking of reconciling, can we reconcile the books with double entry account keeping?
Literally black
in the Indian Capital Trust account.
And maybe you could share some of your thoughts. Maybe you've got completely different thoughts than me. Maybe you've changed your mind on this issue.
Everybody has
since the news and the actual evidence now of what they're
That's what the rain did to my rolling papers.
Oh, big thunder boomer there. There we go. Got my son's report card and cleaned out his desk today of what has been a disaster of a year. No question. In my household, it was a disaster.
Because the teachers were on strike. Every teacher's union
went on
strike. By the way, they were talking about how the mandatory vaccines for employment, you do
friends, being social. Said, of course, goodbye to his teachers, who I think did about as good a job as they could. And I asked her, are you vaccinated? And I asked her that for a reason. It's none of my business.
That's for a reason.
But to me, there's absolutely no excuse at this point for teachers not to be vaccinated. And there's no excuse for hearing any reason that kids should not be going back to school in the fall. None. And so I found it a little odd when the education minister tweeted out something. Stephen Lecce said that he's committed to a full-time in-person return to class this fall and will seek the expertise of pediatric leaders. How they can do this. Well, excuse me.
The younger kids get to stay home.
Pediatricians have been offering advice for months. They've been begging this government to keep kids in class.
It's -50.
Why haven't you been listening all this time?
You still got to go to school.
We will talk about that. Stay with us in just a minute. And we'll talk to one of the leading pediatricians on that fight after this quick break. Stay with us here on Point. I'm Alex Pearson. This is Global News Radio.
You're whitewashed. I got to hear what she says. No, I'm addicted to bad advertising. The clock. I'm addicted to the bad advertising and the racism. I'm addicted to racism. But no, not in like, I don't know how to frame that in the right way. I got to hear this whitewashing. I got to hear what she has to say about this issue.
They haven't seen me lately. I've been busy finding myself, trying to get this money, been sipping, getting high by myself. Track memory on the beat, sliding cocoa busting downtown, belly of the beast, getting work by the brick and sell it by the piece. I got foot soldiers, I ain't sweating the police. I made a killing off a crack in the 80s. Let me tell you how I did it. I got a group of homies that was down with it. We started small ops with consigned critics, had a strap by the dick. I had to live with it. Hand-to-hand exchanges with strangers before gangbangers started taxing street corner hustle. It was less dangerous. My skill made price, but money came nameless. We took over and turned it to something more famous. With free basic king plugging, all kinds of shit coming. Gold chains to tape decks, TVs to dick sucking. Supply and demand, the people meant nothing. If it wasn't me, it would have been the next man hustling.
What type of drugs do you do? I probably served you. The daddy and your mama that birthed you. I'm on the grind from morning to past curfew. With a decade of dope, I'm here to mind swerve you. Whether it's a kilogram, take a pillow slam. You can call me the dealer, man. I serve the streets cause I put the candy in your hand. In the decade of dope, I'm your pusher, man.
Yo, I'm a late 70s baby, so I was raised in the 80s. Yo, my favorite phrase, fuck you, then pay me. Yo, I first learned how to lace a J before I weigh 80 pounds. Now I chop them, but ain't starving in Haiti. Yo, smoking weed and hashish is something real ancient. Assassins used to get high before they were slain. Yo, these rappers kinda influenced me to start blazing. What I'm saying, my dad's wailing, getting high in the basement. Yo, I know they used to puff heavy back in the 60s. But who was smoking kush with the thorns at the whiskey? And I ain't hell, I get in here by Mrs. Lewinsky. But we live in hell, so I smoke to understand the mysteries. Indigenous in me, sip peyote in the tea. Eating mushrooms, blowing breeze, living nature with the trees. Cypress Hill got me stoned, made me wanna kill a man. Red corn and gold face made me go and snip some grams.
What type of drugs do you do? I probably served you. The daddy and your mama that birthed you. I'm on the grind from morning to past curfew. With a decade of dope, I'm here to mind swerve you. Whether it's a kilogram, take a pillow slam. You can call me the dealer, man. I serve the streets cause I put the candy in your hand. In the decade of dope, I'm your pusher, man.
Technology's feeling, that Android Auto and Apple CarPlay on all models feeling, that visit HondaOntario.com feeling, great, because to get that Honda feeling now, feeling, tax is extra.
Tax, we all go.
The not Toronto or whatever, Ontario. Yeah, no, you're gonna bombard the fucking thing. We know. We don't care. Keep it up.
You have reached the Toronto Police Service Bail and Parole Unit. In conjunction with the City of Toronto dealing with the current COVID-19 crisis, we are hereby temporarily suspending all in-person reporting to our facility. We will not be open to the public until further notice as directed by the Chief of Police. If you're calling in to report, please apply or leave a message with the following information. Your full name, please spell the last name, your date of birth, contact number you can be reached at, BPAS number if known. You can also report by contacting us online at the following email address, bail@torontopolice.on.ca. Thank you for your cooperation.
And he's going to seek the expertise of pediatric leaders, which I find just confounding. Because pediatricians across this country, certainly across Ontario, have been waving the warning flags for months of begging this government to keep kids in class, and they didn't listen. And we talked about this recent study done for the Government of Canada by BC researchers, which pretty much confirms schools are safe. Kids aren't spreading or getting COVID. So why would there be any doubt about kids going back? Dr. Martha Fulford is a pediatric infectious disease specialist at McMaster Children's Hospital in Hamilton Health Services. Great to have you, doctor.
Thank you for asking me.
You really have been at the forefront of this fight. You were one of the signers of this letter begging the Premier to listen. And I found it a little off-putting that the Education Minister is going to consult with pediatricians. There's not much to consult about. You guys have been telling them what to do.
Yes, this is true. Actually, every pediatric organization in Ontario, as well as the Canadian Pediatric Society and Children First Canada, all unanimously have indicated that if what we are most concerned about is the safety of our children, then they should all be in school. And this is because safety, of course, is more than just COVID. As we know by now, one of the remarkably good news stories with COVID is that children are extremely unlikely to have any kind of adverse outcomes if they do get it.
80% of the schools do not have mechanical ventilation systems.
From our response to COVID and from school closures has been huge, and it's going to be lifelong for some of these children. So yes, we have been advocating for open schools for a very long time.
I mean, in my mind, and I think in a lot of parents' minds, I mean, at this point, there should be absolutely no excuse why no teacher is vaccinated. They have had lots of time. But there should already, in my mind, be a plan to get kids back. And those discussions are still being had. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we being so reactive instead of proactive? I mean, kids need stability. Parents need to know what's going on. Because if we're not going back to class, I think we need to have options, and parents should be able to decide, okay, fine, I'll go to private school or I'll choose an independent kind of learning, but I'm not going through what I went through last year.
Yeah, it is a bit, it's only Ontario. I think maybe there's still some people in this province who haven't registered that it's only Ontario that has had such prolonged closures. British Columbia has kept its schools open since really June of last year, and they've had exactly the same waves and cycles and problems that Ontario had. Alberta had very limited school closures, were very targeted.
They got the highest rate
Quebec,
of fucking
even with
Delta
very
variants
strict curfews, kept its schools open. Again, I think very short closures. So we could learn from other jurisdictions. But the other thing is, we're in a very different situation in September because COVID's not going away. I mean, we are obviously still going to have COVID circulating. It will become an endemic virus. But what we are not going to see, because we vaccinate our vulnerable adults, is the surge to our healthcare system. And I know it's hard to remember, but the whole point of all these measures was so we wouldn't have an overwhelmed and collapsed healthcare system, and we wouldn't have overflowing intensive care units. And by vaccinating adults, we have fundamentally changed the nature of COVID. So there will be
by the number of days you spent in
but these will be mild community cases, which is what we deal with every single year with seasonal respiratory viruses. And so, like British Columbia, like Quebec, like most of Canada, schools should just be planning to reopen because all of the major concerns that we had a year ago are no longer facing us.
Yeah, not to mention, we spent $150 million on field hospitals that were not built just for this very issue of making sure hospitals don't get overwhelmed. I mean, if they're kind of gear up for a fourth wave, would you hear Dr. Davila kind of, wrapping a bit of the rhetoric up saying, well, we've got to watch out for this double mutant Delta virus. Well, let's get ahead of it. Let's get ahead of that and start making sure that we're shored up, because I just, even the most cautious of parents, I think, are seeing the long-term long-term effects that having so little school has done to their kids. And the other conversation, doctor, that we're not hearing is, how are we getting the kids caught up? I just got my son's report card today, and he didn't do well. And I know he shouldn't be going on to the next grade, and yet there he goes.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I think this pandemic has highlighted is maybe we were getting very complacent about the education system, and it has been underfunded chronically for a while. And I think it has highlighted that it is a critically important part of our society, of our economy, of our future, is something that does need to be invested into. And that's exactly one of the things that we do need to start looking at. How are we going to do the makeup for students with the educational interruption? How are we going to let them catch up? It is pretty clear that we have some pretty crumbling infrastructure across the province, and this is not
80%
okay.
of the schools don't have mechanical ventilation systems.
About restrictions and worrying about COVID, which, thank heavens, because of our ability to vaccinate adults, we're not going to have the severity again. But if nothing else, it seems to me that this has highlighted just how important schools are, and that we shouldn't be taking them for granted, and this shouldn't be it should be a critical, non-negotiable essential service going forward. Teachers need to be supported, the schools need to be supported, and our kids need to be supported. And this is not because I'm worried about COVID at this point. This is because I'm worried about our kids and their future.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I already know that they're being pushed through to next year.
You already knew you weren't worried about COVID. Hold on.
They need to. I wish they would all just redo the year, but I know there'll be a lot of pushback to that.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it would be nice to hear those conversations being had now. Dr. Fulford, I've got to let you go on that note. Stay dry, stay safe, and
we can take the teachers to a mandatory math test or English test or some sort of mandatory test.
All right, cheers. That's Dr. Martha Fulford. She's really been at the head of this fight to make the province and the Premier aware of the long-term damage being done to these kids. You know, that collateral damage we hear about. All right, we are assuming we're going to stay on track here and have the power on, but you never know on a night like that tonight, but we'll do our best.
Yeah,
Going to open the phone lines to this question next if you want to call in. How are you going to celebrate Canada Day? Are you going to celebrate it? Because there's been a whole lot of noise made about, should it be canceled or should it be about reflecting sorrow following the discovery of these unmarked graves?
Guns will be at church
and so, has the dark chapter changed how you feel about this country? And have your views changed on Indigenous issues now that we actually have evidence of these crimes?
Arm the homeless.
And when it comes to Aaron O'Toole, is he politicking on this thing, or is he right to defend this country? 416-870-6400 or 888-225-TALK, 8255. It's your turn to have your say. I'm Alex.
No, any women in their 40s who were childless and happy. I didn't know them. I didn't see them portrayed in pop culture. They just were not around. If they were portrayed in pop culture, they were portrayed as like very sad
or forced into decisions about not having kids because
Tuesday's Automax jackpot is an estimated $55 million, plus an estimated 4 Max Millions. Why dream to the min?
5 minutes to fill. I wonder how horrible the
今天,明天,今天比
比 means than. For example, 今天比昨天热.
Oh, tell me more. We shower regularly to get rid of what we've accumulated.
Yes.
And we cut our hair to get rid of what we've accumulated.
Yes.
And there are other important things we do just to get rid of what we've accumulated.
Have you ever noticed that 1-800-GOT-JUNK has a question mark at the end of it?
Yes, I have noticed that.
We make junk disappear.
Why I can't dial the number. I don't have the question mark button on my phone.
All you have to do is point.
Can you come right now?
We're on our way.
Call 1-800-GOT-JUNK or visit 1-800-GOT-JUNK.com.
Today may seem like just another day. Same morning smoothie, same gas up for the grocery run, same checking of your bank balance. But with RBC Vantage, today unlocks powerful benefits. So that smoothie now earns rewards points when you pay with debit.
Oh.
Gassing up the car unlocks savings at Petro-Canada.
Oh.
And checking your bank balance in the RBC mobile app unlocks a personalized budget in seconds.
Ah.
RBC Vantage. Unlock powerful benefits every day with an RBC personal bank account.
Hey, are you using multiple apps to run your construction jobs and projects?
What's up with that?
Consolidate all of your one-off apps with SiteMax and lighten up. SiteMax is a simple, powerful construction management platform for the field and office. You get safety, drawings, time cards, photos, daily reporting, and a ton of other features you will use all in one place. Call today and see for yourself. Book your free demo at sitemax.cloud.
Is someone you love struggling with addiction, anxiety, depression, or low self-esteem? Save their life. The farm in Stouffville offers the best chance for recovery, with Canada's highest success rate, thanks to more therapists than beds, and unprecedented aftercare support. Make the call your loved one won't make.
I'm Yona Budd, Clinical Director of the farm in Stouffville. We can help you and your loved one. Talk to me, please. thefarmrehab.com.
And time now for a check-in on the roads with chopper traffic. Here's Ari Rabinovich.
And after those earlier problems on the eastbound 401 all cleared away, we're finally starting to see some gradual improvements. Now, it still is pretty slow in spots with regular volume, but no major problems on the east 401 right now. On the southbound 404, still problems just south of Highway 7 towards the 407. Two left lanes in the HOV are blocked with emergency roadwork, causing some pretty big delays. Also on the North Don Valley Parkway at Don Mills, just on the approach, right lane still blocked with a stalled vehicle to watch out for, so delays from Bayview Bloor. Eastbound QEW at Bronte, a crash in the left lane in the HOV, and also problems on the southbound 410 at the ramp to the 401 in the right lane, a crash here. A message from Canadian Blood Services. The need for blood is on the rise. There's an immediate need for donors through the Canada Day weekend. Book now at blood.ca. I'm Ari Urbanovich, Global News Radio 640 Toronto Chopper Traffic.
Tell me to fuck off and never come back. That would be the fastest way to get shit done, man.
Insightful, engaging, and intelligent. This is CFNJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto, a Chorus Entertainment company. You're listening to Global News Radio.
This country, if you donate blood, they ask you if you're gay, or like they ask you 3 different ways if you're gay. And you're like, why the fuck is that relevant?
Flynn, in his first appearance Tuesday as Ontario's long-term care minister, Rod Phillips announced the easing of more restrictions within nursing homes and long-term care settings.
As of July 7th, residents will be able to have as many designated caregivers as they need. Up to 10 people can visit a resident outpost. All residents can have an indoor visit with 2 visitors
mention of ventilation,
and personal care services like hairdressers will be allowed in the homes.
Well, Phillips says all limits on visitors at long-term care homes will be lifted whenever the province enters step 3 of reopening. But also, Phillips offered an apology for the province's handling of the long-term care sector amid the pandemic.
Successive governments, including this one, failed residents, they failed families, and they failed our staff. And on behalf of both past governments and the current government, I apologize for that. I think that's a necessary step so that we can take the action we need to do now to move forward.
Well, Phillips says the nearly 4,000 people who lost their lives is not the standard that the government should live up to. Ontario health officials, meantime, are urging residents of the province to avoid traveling outside their home region over the upcoming Canada Day long weekend, despite a partial lifting of health restrictions that begins tomorrow. Dr. Barbara Yaffe, the province's Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health, says she is concerned about the spread of the more dangerous Delta variant of COVID-19 if people let their guard down.
I think we would obviously discourage people from moving between regions that are currently affected, such as Waterloo and other regions. But if they are going to do it, they need to consider other factors, including are they fully vaccinated? Has it been 2 weeks since their second dose, so that they're considered fully immunized?
Ontario begins phase 2 of reopening tomorrow, meaning some businesses will expand the number of people they can serve, while others, such as hair salons, will reopen after being closed for weeks. While the province's newly appointed Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Kieran Moore, took questions from reporters for the first time since he assumed the role this past weekend. Moore was asked, as the province readies to move into stage 2 of reopening, could a move into stage 3 be moved up? But he says the province is carefully monitoring what is happening because of
Xi Jinping, General Secretary of CPC Central Committee, presents the award. Among the honorees are those who've contributed to China's revolution, reform and opening up, poverty eradication, and the building of a modernly prosperous society in all aspects. The CPC Central Committee says the honorees have created
moderate prosperity for all.
Yeah, it's up by 0.6 percentage points from the previous report in December, largely thanks to stronger than expected foreign demand.
As a whole, Paul Dubé said the pandemic made public service a challenge to access, and oversight bodies did help in many of those instances. But in the case of public health, Dubé says he received 87 complaints over the last year, and that because there was no oversight body for public health, the complaints often went nowhere. Another issue Dubé found in his report is the slow implementation of bringing in legislation that would give his office jurisdiction over all police oversight bodies. Dave Woodard, Global News.
Canada's chief public health officer says a fourth wave of COVID-19 could be prevented if vaccination rates go substantially higher. But Theresa Tam says Canadians need to be cautious and continue doing simple things like wearing masks and keeping their distance from each other if they are not vaccinated.
We could prevent the fourth wave if we can get the vaccine coverage even higher, including 80% vaccine coverage in the younger adult populations to try and reduce the transmission.
Well, Federal Procurement Minister Anita Anand says the country is on track to exceed its targets for receiving COVID-19 vaccines by the end of this month. That's tomorrow. RCMP in Burnaby, BC are urging residents to check on their neighbors and family members as much of Western Canada remains under the grip of a sweltering heat wave. Officials say 25 sudden deaths have been reported there in the region since yesterday. The cause of those deaths remain under investigation, but police say many of those who died were seniors. Environment Canada says temperatures in the Vancouver area reached just under 32 Celsius yesterday, but the humidity in some areas made it feel closer to 40. And as Global's Robin Gill reports, the record heat is placing major demand on the province's power grid.
BC Hydro, the province's power utility, says even electricity records are being broken because of the demand to power air conditioning and fans, and that has led to power outages in the Vancouver area. Keep in mind that 60% of the people in British Columbia don't even have air conditioning, and if they did, that would be a greater toll on the grid.
The GTA's top stories on demand. Set your Alexa flash briefing to play 640 Toronto. In sports, first pitch is just a few minutes out from Buffalo as the Blue Jays get set to open a three-game series against the Seattle Mariners. Robbie Ray will start on the mound for Toronto, while Seattle counters with righty Chris Flexen. Meanwhile, England is through to the quarterfinals.
They changed the rooms around. What are you talking about?
And that party has not made its original aspiration to work for the fairway of the Chinese people only. But the party also aspired to work for the peace and progress of the world.
Strong momentum of development. Both sides have firmly supported each other on issues concerning their core interests, conducted fruitful strategic coordination, and effectively safeguarded their common interests. I believe under the guidance of the China-Russia Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation, no matter how many obstacles we have to overcome on the road ahead, both China and Russia will stay united and move forward with determination.
President Vladimir Putin said the extension will lay a more solid foundation for the long-term development of Russia-China relations.
В России хранят память о славных страницах совместной истории.
Russia keeps many common memories in the history of the two countries and wishes China to continuously make new achievements under the leadership of the Communist Party of China in its economic and social development and in international affairs. As you said, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the signing of the China-Russia Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation, today we will issue a joint statement which will also lay a solid foundation for the long-term development of Russia-China relations and the stability of the international order.
Signed in 2001, the treaty stipulates that the two sides will only solve their differences through peaceful means. Both sides vow to respect each other's choice for the course of political, economic, social, and cultural development. For more, we are now joined on the line by Kamal Makhilialiev, affiliated researcher at Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law in Sweden.
So, bottom line is, when it comes to that day, I think everyone celebrate it as you want.
I'm going to listen to Chinese
If
radio
I take
all day,
a more
bitch.
academic look on this, it's very important. Just because
Because
those
it's in
kind of
English, the
treaties
Russian radio's in
that
Russian.
are
It's not gonna help.
concluded as a part of friendship agreements between the two states, as powerful as China and Russia, and as big as China and Russia, are very important for the extension, because the extension shows that the parties are actually on the line of continuing the development of their relations. And that means that they are at least happy with the situation that have transpired with the development of relations across these 20 years. And another interesting sign here is that this treaty wasn't amended. That means that the sides are also happy with the state of the treaty.
Yes, and also the joint statement issued by President Xi and President Putin stated that Russia needs a prosperous and stable China and vice versa, and that the two countries see each other as preferred partners. So what does that tell about the relationship between the two, and what opportunities can they actually provide for each other's development?
Sounds like a Facebook relationship status.
Well, if I can start from the second question first, I don't think there are areas where the China and Russia cannot provide the opportunities for each other's development. We're talking about two very large and very economically and politically powerful states, which
large
the area of cooperation between which is basically covering all the sectors of economy, policy, and social relations, even also cultural exchanges, education. So I don't think there are areas that you can exclude from the this block of opportunities that can be provided for each other. But
Russian built trucks with
exactly
plates in China
agreement right now tells, or the treaty or its extension and the statement tells about the relationship between China and Russia, tells two things. First and foremost, we need to focus on the idea of the preferred partners. While there is this understanding that there is a strategic partners that is more usually used in the political terminology to refer to partners building some kind of the same common strategy in foreign relations. This is excluded from the relationship. So, but this is also very much tied to the idea of countries developing
countries in the world,
in cooperation, but independently, especially in line with their foreign policies. And this is natural for the countries like China and Russia, too big to synchronize their foreign policies. So the strategic partnership agreement, as opposed to this one, is concluded with the countries that are much smaller and that are willing to synchronize their foreign policy, which we will not see in the development of the relations or in this treaty.
And it also noted that the China and Russia relationship is different from the military and political alliance in the Cold War era. This is a new type of international relationship that does not seek expediency, has no ideological factors, respects each other's interests and internal affairs, and is not directed against any third country. How do you think we should understand this?
Well, academically speaking, you have two states that have always had in their state building the ideas of international legal positivism, so to say. And that means that the respect towards the state sovereignty, that means the respect of the principles of foreign intervention in the internal affairs of other states, that means the adherence to the principles that have been there in the UN Charter, and following this kind of arrangement that we have since World War II, so to say, by the book and by the letter of the law. And in this understanding, we have China and Russia who are sticking to the same principles, that they will not be interfering in each other's internal affairs, and they are expecting this from each other and from the other states in the international relations. So we have to understand this specifically as it is, as this international legal positivism that have always been on the level of the principles in the relation between two states.
And the statement mentioned the rising threat of terrorism, extremism, and separatism in countries near China and Russia. So what role do you think the two countries could play in dealing with regional stability?
Reporting each other's terrorists to each other.
That deals with the security issues that both China and Russia face. They have a very large and extensive borders, and of course they face the challenges to the security in terms of cross-border crime, including terrorism, extremism, and even separatism. And I think here the cooperation on the level of the security can be very easily achieved, and it has been proceeding and continuous in the development of relations between China and Russia. But there's also this indicator to the extremism and terrorism fight that has been going on since for these last 20 years. I think it's not to that.
40 Middle East years, and, you don't want to reference certain things in the previous 20.
Borders, for example, in Afghanistan.
Yes, and the two sides have agreed to safeguard genuine multilateralism, and they said they oppose the behavior of some small groups of nations trying to address international issues with their own alternative plans, which have not received international consensus. And they also oppose political confrontation in multilateral institutions. What do you think they are referring to?
I think this can be construed as directed at the concrete issue in the international arena, but that would be speculation. What I can say about
we're asking you to speculate, motherfucker.
It just shows the general dissatisfaction of both Russia and China when it comes to the problems that the United Nations faces, or the United Nations Security Council faces. This opposition to multilateral institutions, so to say, or the fragmentation of the international legal order, which have been opposed by these countries that are adherent to the classical point of international law, where the issues of the international peace and security are dealt with on the multilateral level as they are outlined in the United Nations Charter through the UN Security Council, UN General Assembly, and other multilateral institutions that are included into the United Nations system. And they have been very vocal about this in the United Nations itself and other international forums, saying that there is right now a fragmentation of this order, and there is an opposition to work with multilateral institutions, which China and Russia deplore, basically. So this may be, of course, a swing at some kind of situation in the international level, but I would say naming one would be speculation from my side. I would like to avoid it.
Okay. Thank you, Kamal Makili Aliyev, affiliated researcher at Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law in Sweden. Thanks for joining us. You're listening to World Today. We'll be back.
With the great effort made.
That's right. China Radio International. Their concern is the whole world. Right. And they're telling you what they're doing. They're just letting you know this is what's happening. Period. Fuck you. Hong Kong is considered an internal affair to China. And so is everything to do with Ukraine and Russia. You're not stopping that.
DI has picked up, which jumped from $26 billion in 2002 to over $196 billion in 2016.
16 minutes past the hour. The Chinese foreign minister is calling on G20 members to lead by example in safeguarding multilateralism. Chen Yuban has more.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has attended the G20 foreign ministers meeting from video link in Beijing on Tuesday afternoon. He says the G20 should lead by example by safeguarding multilateralism.
We should adhere to win-win cooperation and oppose zero-sum games. Multilateralism is not just a slogan, and it cannot become a package that promotes unilateralism.
Multilateralism was the key word repeated at Tuesday's meeting, as the foreign ministers call on all parties to cooperate on trade and commit to boost the recovery from the pandemic. China echoed the thoughts, saying the G20 should lead the way in the global economic recovery.
We need to ensure and stabilize the global production and supply chains, and avoid the fragmentation of the international market, the colonization of cooperation mechanisms, and ideology in rules and standards. We need to promote structural reforms and achieve a recovery of high quality and resilience.
The Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting is one of the ministerial meetings organized as part of the G20 Leaders Summit 2021. The main event will be hosted by Italy in Rome in October later this year. The 2021 G20 under the Italian presidency will focus on three broad interconnected pillars of action: people, planet, prosperity. Foreign Minister Wang Yi says challenges still remain for fighting against the global pandemic. He says all countries should continue to strengthen cooperation on vaccines, diagnosis, and
my grandfather was in World War I, and he fought alongside First Nations people.
That was not me. Oh, have we lost all of me? No, I think I just lost my calls. My apologies. I think I'm still on air, right, Corey? Oh, I'm on air. All right, sorry, that was not me. I can actually, I know I'm the worst with the phones. That's not I take the ownership, but I did not hang up on you.
About to say something good about First Nations people, and the government said no.
I remain on air, though, so that is a good thing. But I thank you very much for your calls and your thoughts. And, bottom line is I think people should have the liberty to celebrate as they feel, reflect as they want, and let us all heal. This is going to go on for a long time, these revelations. So we're not any further away from it. This is only the beginning. So I appreciate your calls. All right, when we come back, we will get our top talkers in here, and then we're going to talk to a dance, a gentleman who owns a dance company, and they're still waiting to open.
What did those people do for
right now? You know what he's doing? He's running art classes for kids because he can't have dancers in there. Can you imagine a disaster like that? We'll get his thoughts. He didn't think Doug Ford's comments were very funny yesterday. Lots coming up. We got a very busy show, so stay with us here on Point. I'm Alex Pearson. This is Global News Radio.
No, there's an ad running.
Time now for a check on the roads with a look at Chop.
I must have seen this on cable TV at the Toronto South Delta Chelsea. I forget what app it's supposed to. I think they're selling the phone, whatever the fuck they're selling. I try not to pay attention to the commercials, but they got me addicted to BET. And it shows a bunch of people signing into a Zoom call type of thing, doing a dance class. Dance includes everybody or some shit.
Last year, not this year, but I believe in a few years' time, we'll return to that level of consumption. And China's
this one. They switched the two. World Today is on the B channel now.
Major commodities inflation that is going on right now. So to relax or to reduce trade barriers and to increase multilateral cooperation at this juncture is very important for all the countries to unite together to overcome current
lumber and natural gas.
That's why G20 as an international economic cooperation platform should and could play a very important role in facilitating more trade at this point to help countries to recover.
While the conference offers an opportunity for the foreign ministers of major economies, including China, Russia, and the United States, to address issues facing the world, what is the significance of the occasion in light of today's political landscape?
Other than the United Nations, G20 is probably the only platform where major countries can all come and sit down to talk with each other. Right now, the United States labels Russia as its adversary and China as its long-term competitor. And it is very difficult for all those countries, Russia, China, United States, and European Union countries to come together and talk about common challenges at this point. That's why I think G20 provided a rare opportunity for all the countries to meet and to discuss the solutions for the very difficult issues such as vaccination and also economic recovery, microeconomic policy coordination, and also many other regional stability issues. So other than economic issues, they also should talk about current tensions, geopolitical tensions, and also how to reduce the barriers for travel in the future when vaccination is provided to many more countries.
That was
Russia needs cheap concrete work done.
China's
good at building skyscrapers, apparently.
Chinese ambassador to the UK, Zheng Ziguang, says he hopes trade ties between the two countries can be strengthened. despite strong headwinds in the relationship. Zheng made his first public appearance as ambassador at a webinar celebrating 20 years of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in the UK.
The business communities of our two countries should deepen existing cooperation in trade, in goods, traditional financing,
We got
manufacturing.
you switched them back again.
Advantage is that we have this full package. It's not just the e-business or the end consumers. It's also the infrastructure construction for things like cold chain logistics and upstream data center. So eventually it will become this new, or you can say a parallel economic form alongside with China's real economy. And that can provide a lot of momentum since we know that data is the new oil for the new economy. And China will take a lead in that effort.
And then earlier you mentioned the industrial production recovery is quite strong in China. So we talk about the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, and also the private enterprises. So in the first 5 months of this year, the combined profits of SOEs increased by 170% year on year. So why are they increasing so much? And what about China's private enterprises?
Actually, for most sectors in the private enterprises, their profit increase is a lot faster than SOEs. And last year, it was SOEs leading China out of the recession. But this year, it's mainly the private sector that's driving the growth. The main reason is partly because that SOEs in China are controlling the upstream resources. So this year we know commodity prices are really high. So the industrial profits for upstream industries are very high. But on top of that, there's also the element that SOEs are really good at against the machinery and equipment making. And this year, this is one of the fastest growing sector. And for the private economy, they are more dominant in consumer-facing business, including e-business. And things like clothing, shoes, electronics. And those sectors are picking up really fast with the global economic recovery. I think their pace would become even faster than the SOE in the coming months, since we have seen this strong rebound in the US economy. And I think that will continue through the rest of this year.
Wait, what?
And over the past few months, major economies around the world have been facing inflationary pressure because of the US stimulus packages and their money printing strategies. So how will the US stimulus affect China's economy?
The US economy is mainly recovering because of this huge stimulus. It's unprecedented. And the major impact on China is through this mechanism that the US consumes and China produces. Right now, China is also prioritizing its climate change policy, that is to peak carbon emission by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. So with those two goals in the background, that means a lot of the industrial outputs will be constrained. And we see this rising demand from the US and then a constrained supply from China. The result would be a rising price for almost all the final goods, especially those exported to the US. And that's one main source for the US inflation. And I don't think that can go away anytime soon because it's mismatch in demand and supply.
And under such a scenario, what do you expect for China's fiscal and monetary policy this year? The China Central Bank has pledged a flexible and precise implementation of its monetary policy. So how should we understand that?
China's monetary policy has been tighter this year compared to last year. But still, the policy signal is not going towards a tightening direction. Even if we have higher industrial prices now, there's no sign that the central bank will raise interest rate anytime soon, because they understand that when the economy is going through such a rapid recovery, corporate sector needs more funding. And that means in certain sectors, they will even get cheaper financing than before. And we have seen some signals recently about lowering the long-term loan, the cost for long-term loans for major sectors. And if that becomes true, it will mean that the industrial sector would have access to cheaper loans, but at the same time, the housing sector still won't face such an easy time when they want to take out more loans.
And look at the reform and opening up measures that China has taken, this 2 years. For example, China will build Zhejiang province into a demonstration zone for achieving common prosperity, and also to build Hainan into a free trade port. So how can all this help to boost the country's social and economic development?
Those different pilot zones are aiming for different purposes. Like the Zhejiang Common Prosperity Zone is addressing the inequality issue of China, and then the Hainan Zone is to open up more of China's domestic consumer market and also the capital market. So both are midterm to long-term projects. And what they will do is to have more flexibility in local policies to demonstrate the rest of China how they can achieve this goal. Like in Zhejiang's case, they have prioritized their rural economy for a long time, and that's why we have seen the fastest growth in their rural income. And that's the main reason why the income gap in Zhejiang province is much lower than the rest of China. And Hainan, in a similar fashion, we've seen a lot more policies targeting to attract foreign investors.
Justin Trudeau said he admired the Chinese government because they could turn their economy on a dime. He said that.
I think that, he struck the right tone, especially coming in as the new minister. And I think that, he's clearly, and as he indicated through his press conference, going to be making changes to further address the needs in long-term care that, frankly, and I think he made a good point there, this is not this government that was the sole
The Chinese foreign minister is calling on G20 members to help safeguard multilateralism, and Israel's foreign minister has issued a call for peace. And Shane Bigham with you. Stay with us here on the Beijing.
Hey, what happened to your... The court's ordered him out and he won't move out. They're trying to evict the prime minister and they can't.
But people want action on this. They don't want to hear about blame now. Fix it.
Well, look, absolutely. I think what we saw today was a master class in communications, and I think that companies and organizations need to take note that this is the way to address a problem, be it a trivial customer service matter to something as serious as this. You do what Rod Phillips did today. You take ownership. You don't pass the buck. You apologize, and you explain a pathway forward. So kudos to him. He did everything absolutely perfectly, and he did it since being appointed to the position where within, hours of his appointment and his swearing in.
Comprehensive business of the day. The Beijing Hour. Beijing Hour. Your very own window to China and the rest of the world.
I gave him a full minute. I think.
A million, a billion, or maybe a gazillion years ago, a giant split open an egg. Then came the lady.
There right now in an important position at an important time. So good for him. Just everything done perfectly, I think.
Well, if he's going to fix his reputation and win over people, taking action would win over a lot of people. So it would go a long way. Let me pause it there, guys, and when we come back, we'll dive into a couple of other issues, including comments that the education minister said about Islamophobia and investments being made in that. And then we'll chat about a gun buyback program that is going to cost us a fortune and solve nothing. We'll talk about that and more. Stay with us here. Alex Pearson on point. This is Global News Radio.
Yeah, that was my problem with it.
Of the Communist Party of China and the award ceremony, which we all saw today, is a very major event. And I think one common feature of all these 29 awardees is actually their commitment to serving the people. And I think this underlines the importance of
July 1st medal recipients are heroes coming from and deeply rooted in the people. They are ordinary heroes who are dedicated to their work without a complaint.
sacrifices to themselves.
The award is regarded as one of the nation's highest honors. It is also the first time the award has been awarded. So what message does the profile of the world's first recipients deliver at home and abroad?
It is the highest honor, but it's the first time it's ever been awarded.
Yeah, we saw the first ever ceremony to award the July the 1st awards for the Distinguished Outstanding Party members. This symbolizes to the whole nation in China that the Communist Party members are truly the heroes of our society, of our time, and we need to recognize the tremendous amount of sacrifices they have given to the party, to the society, to the Chinese nation as a whole. And further, for many other things they do, they actually have international implications, because we firmly believe that if China can do its homework well, if China can maintain stability and contribute to world peace, the world will be a better world. And I hope the rest of the world can also understand why China is as it is today, and it is indispensable and inseparable from all these commitments and sacrifices by the millions of the Communist Party members, including these truly distinguished and outstanding representatives of the Communist Party of China.
The membership of the Communist Party of China has grown rapidly over the past 100 years.
Oh, shit.
At a webinar celebrating 20 years of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in the UK.
The business communities of our two countries should deepen existing cooperation in trade.
Expunged PWOC. Record removal made easy. Call 416-498-7111. Online, pwoc.com.
Chez Spence, we've been proudly connected.
Serve the people, and they are of the people. They come from all walks of life. They made tremendous amount of sacrifices. For example, whenever there is a flood, it is normally the Communist Party of China members who rush to the forefront. They offered to rush to the forefront. They do the most dangerous thing. And I would say this explains why China today is so unified and we are so coherent. And I think the whole Communist Party of China is reinvigorated today because this ceremony demonstrates again what this Communist Party of China cares about, what it wants to recognize.
But who knows after that?
And dangerous heat wave that's scorching parts of the Northern Hemisphere, including the United States and Canada. World Meteorological Organization spokesperson Claire Nolla says temperatures may reach as high as 45 degrees Celsius for at least 5 more days.
The heat is being caused by an atmospheric blocking pattern, so it means that these very high temperatures are concentrated over one particular area. And normally you have the jet stream, which is this fast, high-moving belt of wind, which moves these weather systems on, and it's not happening this time. So it's almost like a pressure cooker effect. You know, you've got very high.
What happened to the jet stream?
The temperature in Seattle hit 42 degrees Celsius on Monday evening, well above Sunday's all-time high of 40 degrees Celsius. Canada recorded its all-time high on Sunday, with Lytton hitting 46.6 degrees Celsius. And that was then broken on Monday with a high of 47.9 degrees Celsius. Nolla says these conditions are also being experienced in other parts of the Northern Hemisphere, including the Arabian Peninsula, Eastern Europe, and Western Russia.
Yeah, but the Arabian Peninsula
live from the Chinese capital. Coming up in business, the World Bank's latest forecast for GDP growth in China.
You're listening to the Beijing Hour.
Because I don't like eating outside. I want to be inside. I want to have air conditioning. I want desperately to be back at the gym. I miss it terribly. But
for the restaurant owner's sake, so although it would be great if we could permanently reopen, I think one of the worst things is the roving strike type of open and close, where you have inventory that goes bad, and you have employees who are put back on unemployment. So, 21 days, not that long. I'd love to speed it up, but not worth the risk.
Yeah, I don't know, Lauren. I'm not buying that anymore because, there are going to be risks. We're stuck with this thing probably forever. It's not going to go away. And I keep hearing the same language, whether it's from the province or from Dr. Davila, this kind of, well, we can't do anything. We could hit stage 4. Dr. Tam today's asked, what can we do when we're fully vaccinated? She's like, well, not much. Well, what's the point? Is this how we're living forever? But I think businesses, they've got to expedite where they can to get open again.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get too much of a different answer from me than Michael's. I do think that, with the risk of the Delta variant, I think that's the big kind of question mark that everybody is worried about, is that, this is so much more transferable, and that kind of wait time between when you get, even your first dose or your second dose, for folks to be able to have that couple of weeks for it to really set in. So, not only will they hopefully not have really adverse reactions if they do happen to come in contact with somebody with COVID or worst case, the Delta variant, that it, wouldn't be more severe. I recognize, and similar to Michael, I would love to, sit in a restaurant and sit in a pub and be indoors. But, at the same time, I also think there are the risk of what we saw earlier in 2021 with the quick opening and then quick closing with the risk of the variant, just not that was a much worse look than waiting a couple of weeks to get it right.
Education Minister Stephen Lecce announcing today the province will give $300,000 in funding to help combat Islamophobia in schools. He says it's an issue that he's passionate about, and awareness and policies and curricular resources are just some of the tools he's going to tackle this. $300,000 not much, won't do much. But my question with this, I mean, Michael, all hate crimes are on the rise when it comes to all faiths. I mean, anti-Semitism. So why not direct it to all hate and not just one group?
Look, I think that's an absolutely fair point that we've seen in recent weeks in Toronto, for example, and in Ontario. Islamophobic hate crimes, anti-Semitic hate crimes, hate crimes against members of the LGBT community. So absolutely, I mean, an investment by society in the $300,000. I don't really get, what's that going to buy us? We need to have a grander plan, a grander probably review of both public awareness, but also some education reform. But this is certainly a start, and Islamophobia must be addressed, and it's violent evil. But so are all the other hates that are out there, and they can't be forgotten.
Lauren?
Yeah, I think I think the same thing. I think it's important to invest in this, but also in other forms that I know the government has done. Last year there were some pretty big investments in anti-racism and anti-hate programs. But I also think it's it's important given the timing of what happened to that poor family in London a couple of weeks ago. And so there's definitely some attention there, and I think it's the right thing to do. And when it comes to $300,000, it might not seem like a big number when it comes to the broader government investments and what those mean. But I think the creation of the money going towards the creation of resources that can be used for parents and students and schools and teachers and the rest of it, I think makes sense as a smart investment to at least have one positive thing towards protecting students in the community of this faith. So I think it's a good step in the right direction, and I think there's obviously for all faiths a lot more that we can do to reduce the amount of hate that we see.
I think you missed the
Don't
point
have a ton
again,
of time
Miss.
on this, so if you can keep your answers short on this. We've got news from Yves Giroux, who's the parliamentary watchdog, and he says that costs of upwards of $756 million will be spent for the Liberals' buyback gun program. This is a program that buys prohibited firearms, and the Trudeau government claims it's going to be around $225 million, but math has never been their strength. These programs in the United States do get lots of guns, and that's because a lot of people trade in their old guns and get better guns, and they do give out a lot of money, but the data also shows they don't actually stop gun crimes. We're talking $750 million for a program that doesn't really historically work, Michael.
Well, it's complete folly, but their gun registry was as well. You know, this party has an ideological opposition to legal and law-abiding firearms owners. Let's go after the criminals. Let's go after those who use guns illegally, and leave the rest of us alone and stop wasting everyone else's money.
Yeah, I mean, gangbangers, Lauren, don't generally trade in their guns. What they do is they rent them out so that other people can use them in gang stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you know, putting efforts towards stopping borders coming across or guns coming across the border, I think would be, you know, a huge help in the right direction. And you know, I can probably, as you said, hazard a guess that the vast majority of people who are committing gun crimes in Canada aren't, you know, going to be turning in their illegally purchased weapons that were smuggled over the border.
All right, guys, got to leave it there. Stay dry, enjoy your night, and we'll chat again. Thank you.
Wait, it was just getting interesting. What the fuck?
To you. Thanks.
You too.
7:43 here on this Tuesday. And we'll talk next with a business owner who owns a dance company. And it's hard to teach dance classes when you can't open and people can't dance. And it's a little bit worse than just losing a dancer for a couple of seasons. A lot of people that lose a season just don't go back, so they don't reach their potential. We'll talk to him.
What is the potential?
Because he didn't find the Doug Ford's comments yesterday very funny about strip joints being closed. So we'll have his story next here on Point on Global News Radio.
And now it's time to go out and take a look at the roads with chopper traffic.
That we need to work on educating.
Zachary Kenrich is a paramedic with South Haven Area Emergency Services. Last year, his team responded to 23 water rescues on Lake Michigan. 3 people drowned. That's when Kenrich started brainstorming on ways his department could cut down on its response time for people struggling in the water. And what he came up with was this. Thanks to a $7,500 grant, the department was able to buy a special drone outfitted with some unique features. It's about the size of a frisbee and is equipped with a camera. Dangling from the center of it is a small folded-up flotation device, which can be released remotely by the drone operator.
Then I can drop it like that.
Once it hits the water, a CO2 canister automatically inflates into a 3-foot by 6-inch yellow flotation tube, big enough to support an adult. Drones dropping inflatables have been popular in Australia for a few years now. And this year, some beaches in California and Florida are also starting to deploy them.
We have tested it multiple times. It's been working very well for us. And this doesn't change anything that we do normally.
But not everyone is gung-ho about using these drones. Dave Benjamin heads the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, a water safety nonprofit group.
This inflatable device would almost literally have to be dropped on their head or in their hands.
If it's not, the victim might not be able to reach the flotation device, or waves could carry it to shore without them. Still, in South Haven, it normally takes emergency responders around 8 minutes to get from the station to the beach and then to the victim in the water. That's pretty quick. But sometimes every second counts, and the drone can get help to the swimmer faster. It can fly up to 40 miles per hour and can reach a victim about 3 minutes quicker. Last year, there were 56 drownings in Lake Michigan, the most on record.
But it is a quick way to get a flotation device out to a victim. And it's very important that that is done as quickly as possible.
BJ Fisher is the Director of Health and Safety at the American Lifeguard Association. He says integrating more technology into these rescue operations is a good thing, but installing more lifeguards at beaches would still be the best option. But that's a challenge for tourist cities like South Haven, which face staffing shortages and have liability concerns about using lifeguards.
It won't solve the problem.
So I got in trouble on Facebook.
With July right around the corner, more and more people are going to be getting in the Great Lakes.
Link to a
the emergency services team here in South Haven, we hope this new drone means fun days at the beach won't turn tragic. For NPR News, I'm Dan Wanshura.
So they just opened their beaches. Why are you swimming on Lake Michigan? What's wrong with you? I don't go swimming in Lake Ontario. You tricked me into that when I was a kid. I didn't know any better. Tricked me into swimming in the lake when I didn't know any better when I was young. But I'll put it to you like this, I've done canoeing and sailing, and I've never ended up in the water by fucking up at boating. Right. I don't go in that water.
Or visit 1-800.
There's deuterium and sewage in that water. Prescription drugs, everything. And drug-resistant bacteria.
Air out. Always trying to save a buck or two around the house. You almost.
The tap water tests positive for prescription drugs and for drug-resistant bacteria. There's like thousands of people that have died from it, in particular if you're immunocompromised.
20-minute shower or flip on that air conditioner. Visit lghomecomfort.ca to learn more.
Vashon Insurance Group presents Did You Know?
Vashon has an RV program for all trailers, motorhomes, and park models. When you're not using your motorhome, they'll send you a check back. It's like a pay-as-you-go policy. Be surprised on how much you can save. Ask the experts at Vashon for details. Vashon Insurance Group. Home, auto, commercial.
I am Conrad Vashon, and we're your insurance broker.
Vashon Insurance Group. Call 416-239-3373. That's 239-3373.
That doesn't. What do you mean you're gonna send me? Fuck off, liar. You don't use your trailer more than you, what, on the road? It's insured.
With Alex Pearson on Global News Radio.
I just have to get advice from the docs. You know, I want to get things open as quickly as possible. I think it's going to come sooner than later. The numbers dropped again. And we need to get the economy booming. The only few things that aren't open.
You need to stop buying jumpsuits from Pakistan and start making them in the jail again.
Really, outside of the casinos and strip joints, they're the only three things that aren't open now.
Well, that was the premiere on Monday, and sounds funny, but if you're the owner of one of those places and that's your livelihood.
What about the bingo hall?
There's nothing funny about it.
Bingo hall's like popping.
And there's a lot more than just strip joints. We're talking dance companies, ballet, hip hop, tap. All of these.
How do they get paid? I don't understand.
And not only are they about to miss out on yet another season of things like dance camp, but when a young dancer can't.
Somebody tried telling me what they do, and they said because I wouldn't ask.
They lose interest, or they end up walking away. And so not only will these dance companies be limited with activity once they do get open, but they will have lost kind of a generation of dancers who will never have learned their true potential. Really. Ryan Daychuk owns Performing Dance Arts. Ryan, good to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
You own 3 different companies in the Toronto area, and it's not about a bunch of 2-year-olds dancing around. You have kids who want to be professional dancers. You've got all sorts of different students at different areas of expertise. How hard has it been in the last?
I talk about dancing.
So get vaccinated.
It's been a race to the finish to try to meet the goal of 70% of adults getting their first dose. Volunteers made phone calls and sent text messages. About 3 million so far. But vaccination rates have slowed, and they aren't going to make it. Even today,
God, democracy and free markets, or you're a heretic in league with the devil who drinks the blood of children. And you literally see this happening with this QAnon conspiracy stuff, where they're taking this to the nth degree. They literally say, if you're a Democrat, you are in league with every evil Satan. You're a pedophile. You're involved in all sorts of weird conspiracies. And this is really what is frightening, is that, there's no self-reflection going on in the U.S. People aren't saying, well, does this make sense? All right. Is it possible that some of the things, the shortcomings that we have are not
harder and easier to move on, but this is obviously terrible that it's back-to-back matches and it hits Serena as well. Oh my God, I can't believe it.
Williams slipped while leading 3-1 in the opening set against Alexandra Sasnovich and left the court for medical treatment after losing the game. She returned and tried to play through the pain, but the 6th seed fell to the ground moments later and decided to.
Why would you ever do that? The risk of injuring yourself versus
the last group did, and then it keeps going back and forth, up and down. And you end up kicking big issues that you have to deal with down the road until there's a quote crisis. Mm-hmm. And today, I think everybody would realize that the U.S. is having internal crisis with the attacks on the Capitol, with the issues regarding race,
even political correctness. I mean,
Donald Trump's vice president became president, and everybody thinks things are going to change.
You know, it's an admirable idea. All right, we should be more concerned and aware of things like that. But it's also creating a backlash, these kind of pendulum swings, as you see other parts of society, especially lower class whites, who say, "Look, I don't agree with this. We've been victimized. Why are we?" These people always say that they're the victims. We're the ones who are white. We're the ones who are being displaced. We're being, you know, remember in North Carolina, the Jews will not replace us, this type of thing. And there's this real sense that America is being taken over by the evil forces that, you know, are represented or talked about by QAnon and things like this. So in that crisis, instead of looking internally, we're tending to say, look, something's wrong here. It can't be our fault. We have the right systems, all right? Everything's fine on this end. It must be somebody else. So this kind of scapegoating, trying to find scapegoats. I mean, this is what you had, you know, in different places. Like, I hate to go back to Germany all the time, but you know, during that period, it was very easy to say, look, the problem is with this group, and if we get rid of it, we get rid of the problem. We can reclaim who we are and our national entity, and this kind of going back, you know, this nostalgia. And this is one of the things that I
these guys' national identity really was based on segregation.
Everything is about, we're back. It's always about, you know, getting back to some point in time, and I don't understand it because there was never a point in U.S. history where everything was just wonderful. You go back to the 60s when people talk about it. What do you have? You have civil rights issues like the 70s, everything.
It's like for every country, every society, there are some strengths, there are some problems in every country. There is no perfect country or no perfect system in a sense. I guess it's the same with ideology. Right? You know, whatever ideology you adopt as a country, and then there are some, you know, strengths, there are some problems. You know, communism, of course, socialism, it seems to me, you know, it has a bad name, partly because of the Soviet Union. Or the collapse of the Soviet Union. So people would say, in English,
which one did you mean?
Say, oh, it's a communist country. Communist China is very negative.
Yeah,
you know, as a Chinese, sometimes you feel awkward because, you know, other people would say, I'm from a democracy, speaking that with some pride. Like a democracy is always good. And then you say, oh, when it mentions, you know, China, or, you know, like, you know, in the 2007, around that time,
remember, on our local radio, they're discussing the dance
business show
studios being closed.
CNN, like I think it's 7 o'clock p.m. I watched that show every day, but every time he mentioned China, he would say, communist China, red China. So it makes you feel awkward because you are from this.
You just spent 20 minutes talking on both stations, talking about Xi Jinping awarding this award.
You feel like a sense of unfair. You know, communism or socialism in China is different from communism or socialism promoted under Soviet Union.
You're putting a finger on a very touchy issue, even within China. In my time here, I've dealt with a lot of people in TV and radio, and there's sometimes a question they'll ask me, even though I'm a foreigner. They will say, I remember a producer was writing up something about, I think it was Pierre Cardin, who was the fashion designer who came to China in the 80s, and said, yes, he said, I wanted to set up my program here because it would be interesting to have a fashion show in communist China. And the producer was asking me, she said, how should I translate that? I really should say socialist, right? Because she was hearing the word socialist, and you know, we talked about socialism with Chinese characteristics, not communism with Chinese. No. So there is an issue there, and I think it's one that China is actually addressing, but it's a terminology problem that is very hairy and complicated, and political scientists need to tear apart. I remember in the day of the 80s, you know, what they were saying was that this period of socialism with Chinese characteristics was on the road to a pure communist ideal utopia, but this was a sort of stop in between, and even the opening up of markets was a sort of necessary step.
Primary stage, right?
They don't
talk about that very much anymore, and I don't think it really matters. But it is an embarrassing little terminology problem. So the issue here is communism is kind of a curse word, right? Because and it's very easy because they're so easy to point to previous communist dictatorships that had resulted in disaster, right? So, but what China has to deal with that as a kind of a philosophical legacy, sort of because when they were actually adopting Marxism, that was another term, Marxism, not communism. I'm watching these documentaries or these TV series about the origins of the party, and they're really fascinating because these issues come up. Is it Marxism, Bolshevism? What are we trying to get? Right? They really were struggling to get. So the Bolsheviks. Despite all these terminology issues, there's a real issue here of still trying to find something that works. And this niggling around with terminology, even in the reform area with Deng Xiaoping, was actually an attempt to do what we're talking about, which is to go towards a model or governance pattern that would produce results. That's why he said black cat, white cat. If it produces wealth and development, then it's a good cat, right?
That is Einar Tangen, an author and economist, Kitty, the one with David Moser, a professor from the Capital Normal University, speaking with my colleague Xu Qinzhuo. And that's all we have for this edition of The World Today. University. I'm Zhao Ying. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Somebody has to make that music. That was a weird custy sound.
Cultural heritage has been promoting action to protect old houses all over the country. And local authorities have also put in place renovation plans for the ancient buildings. The renovation not only protects cultural relics, but also ensures the safety of villagers.
How old are these houses? Are they living?
Tells you delay from just north of Highway 89. On the East 401, we got a new crash at the 400. In the Express, the right lane's blocked and delays back to the 427. Southbound 404 from Highway 7 to the 407. There's 2 left lanes and the HOV blocked with emergency roadwork and a delay from before Highway 7 to south of the 407. Don Valley Parkway northbound problems at Don Mills are clear. East QEW at Bronte problems are clear too. And South 410 at the ramp to the 401. We still got a crash in the right lane here. But on the West 403, problems past the 401. Collector is now clear. New gourmet thins now at Pizza. Fresh dough, hand pressed thin, and topped with fresh arugula and thin sliced prosciutto. 10-inch now just $8.49. Pizza. I'm Ari Urbanovich, Global News Radio 640 Toronto chopper traffic.
They're putting cans in California. They're not like fresh tomatoes. Don't get it twisted. It's canned tomatoes from California instead of the greenhouse grown
in Greater Toronto. This is CFMJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto, a Chorus Entertainment Company.
Entertainment. All this news is being brought to you by an entertainment company. Don't forget that.
Global News at 8 o'clock.
An entertainment system plays video games, right? Sega, segregation A. Play video games. You're fucking it.
From the Global News Desk, I'm Darren Boland. Thanks to vaccination rates among staff and residents at long-term care homes, the province is easing more restrictions within the sector. Newly appointed Minister of Long-Term Care Rod Phillips today announced that 99% of nursing home residents and 84% of staff are fully vaccinated. Global Karamali has a breakdown of the loosened restrictions, along with a possible hint at when Ontario we move into step 3 of reopening.
Starting Wednesday, July 7th, residents at long-term care homes will be able to have outdoor visits of up to 10 people. For indoor visits, residents can have up to 2 visitors and 2 caregivers. Personal care services like haircuts can resume. Cohorting of residents can be relaxed during outdoor activities. When it comes to step 3 restrictions, which could come into effect in late July, residents would have no limits to the number of visitors to the homes. But step 3 doesn't sound like it'll happen any earlier than late July. 21 days after the transition to step 2.
We need that 21 days to be able to understand the impact of opening on our communities, because we never want to take a step backwards. We only want to be moving forwards.
Well, before entering phase 3 of reopening, Ontario needs to get through phase 2, which gets underway tomorrow. Now, this means for the first time in weeks, hair salons will reopen, while some businesses will be able to expand the number of people that they can serve. Dr. Barbara Yaffe, the province's Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health, says Ontario residents will have public health guidelines soon geared to their local COVID-19 circumstances.
We have seen the guidance from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and we are working on guidance that will be specific for Ontario. It will be available shortly.
Well, the federal guidelines allow fully vaccinated people to be in close proximity to each other, even indoors, without wearing a mask. Well, another school year coming to a close today, and thanks to COVID-19, it will end with kids just logging off instead of being able to say goodbye to their classmates and friends in person. And for what's to come in September, the waiting game continues.
For the second June in a row, elementary school kids across the province will be forced to celebrate the last day of school virtually. They'll leave class this afternoon not knowing for certain if they'll be in a physical classroom again in September. Education Minister Stephen Lecce wants kids back behind their school desks.
Our government is firmly committed to getting all children back to class full-time in person this September where they belong.
But before any final decision is made, Lecce says he needs guidance from the province's new Chief Medical Officer of Health.
We've been working with Dr. Moore, spoke with him as recently as yesterday with a focus on returning with a new normal.
Lecce is also looking for back-to-school advice from pediatric leaders, including the head of Sick Children's Hospital. We aren't expecting to hear any concrete fall school plans until sometime in July. Sandy Salerno, Global News.
Well, Canada's procurement minister says the country is on track to exceed its targets for receiving COVID-19 vaccines by the end of this month. Tomorrow, Anita Anand told an Ottawa news conference the provinces and territories have been delivering those vaccines to the arms of Canadians at a record pace.
We have delivered 44 million doses to the provinces and territories. As of yesterday, they have administered more than 36 million doses. And according to the latest numbers, 77% of eligible Canadians have received at least one dose of vaccine.
Well, Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Theresa Tam says accelerating vaccination rates could prevent a fourth wave of illnesses, although she warns Canadians they should continue being cautious to avoid further infections. Well, as offices across Canada begin to reopen, experts say unvaccinated workers might face a rocky return to the office life. Olivia Cicchini, an employment law specialist with the HR firm Peninsula, says some employers are considering policies that would make vaccines a necessary condition of employment.
If you're corporate union and it's not unionized, employers can terminate their employees at any reasons for any time, as long as that reason is not discriminatory. For example, if an employee chooses not to get vaccinated just because of personal choice, then the employer could choose to terminate them on a without cause basis.
Well, still, she says the employer would have to justify the vaccine requirement, and that any person who cannot be vaccinated for medical or religious reasons, and most unionized workers would be exempt from a mandatory vaccine policy. Although the government says by 2035, all new cars and light-duty trucks to be sold in Canada will have to be electric. Now, that's 5 years sooner than its initial goal of 2040. Environment Minister Jonathan Wilkinson says Canada will work with the United States on fuel efficiency and bring in regulations aimed at getting the auto industry to offer more electric vehicles on their lots.
This is where the world is going. This is where the world needs to go. If we are going to meet the obligations that we entered into under Paris, countries around the world are going to need to get on this bus.
Well, the federal government has spent around $600 million on a rebate program to provide discounts to people when they buy electric vehicles to bring down the price. And it says to drive up demand, it will expand the incentives to include more kinds of vehicles, including ones that are used. Listen to us in HD, tune in 95.3 FM, and select Channel 2. In sports, the Blue Jays are on the diamond in Buffalo tonight, opening up a 3-game set against the Mariners. The game now in the top of the third, and the Blue Jays holding on to a 2-0 lead. Meanwhile, in Victoria, BC, Canada's men's basketball team is taking on Greece in a qualifying tournament for a spot at the Tokyo Olympics. Now, Canada's team, arguably the strongest squad in some time, featuring the likes of Andrew Wiggins, RJ Barrett, Nikhil Alexander-Walker, and Lugens Dort. And with the third period just getting underway, Greece is holding on to a 54-49 lead over Canada. Looking at your regional forecast from the Global News Weather Center, heat and rainfall warnings alongside severe thunderstorm watches remain in effect for most of southern Ontario. Rainfall amounts between 50 to 100 millimeters are being reported in some parts, and power outages are also being reported as heavy winds have both toppled trees and knocked over power lines. The thunderstorms are expected to continue overnight with temperatures
by the way,
of 19.
don't go near the rivers or any bodies of water.
This is On Point with Alex Pearson on Global News Radio.
The human being is an amazing creature and can survive a very long time in extreme situations. In the right void, there could be survivors.
Yeah, but you filled them with water.
One of the search and rescue teams in Miami, and we're now into day 6 since that building collapsed in on itself, killing 11 and trapping as many as 150 who still have not been found. And they're still calling it a search and rescue operation. There is still some hope that someone can be found alive, but what a horror show for these families going through this. And what a nightmare these rescue teams are up against. These searches are not easy, and they're not predictable.
A wing of the building fell down. Yeah, the whole fucking
when a rooftop parking deck collapsed into the upper level of an Elliott Lake Mall onto a food court and some small stores. There were 2 people killed and 20 others injured when that happened. And in that collapse, something called HUSAR, the Heavy Urban Search and Rescue Unit, responded. And it was almost as soon as they started rescue efforts, the unstable structure would make their operation even more dangerous because, of course, they had to deal with the instability while trying to find people and get them out alive. John Davidson
structures got built in Canada.
Technical Operations Toronto Fire, also a team coordinator with HUSAR. And John, you were also up at Elliott Lake when that building collapsed in on itself. Good to have you.
You're right. Thank you.
When you arrive on a scene like that, you know, you're kind of facing all these unknowns. And Elliott Lake, what happened there is much smaller than they're dealing with in Miami. But what goes through your head as a person who's running into the unknown? What's that like?
Ostracizing potential listeners.
First of all, it's the unknown of why did this building collapse. I mean, it's just not a normal occurrence. Generally in North America. But first of all, it's you start doing size up, obviously, of how big of a situation it is, time of day, what the type of building it is. So compared to mall, and Miami was obviously a residential structure. Time of day, so it happened, I believe, at 2 a.m. in the morning approximately. So obviously people would be home in their bed sleeping compared to, say, people leaving for work at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I guess your capacity would be less than, say, nighttime. And then there's obviously hazards you have to take into consider, your natural gases, your electrical supply. And then obviously hazards within the building, depending on what the building makeup is. It is an industrial factory compared to a residential, compared to a mall. And then it's like, okay, is there signs of life? So you just kind of have to quickly bundle this together and come up with a plan of how you're going to approach the building, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of moving parts, and time is not your friend, because the more time it takes, the less chance you have of pulling someone else out alive. And I'm sure you've been watching from afar some of the pictures and visuals coming in. I mean, this building essentially pancaked onto itself. They've got the cadaver dogs going in to smell what it can smell of, signs of life. If anyone did survive one of these things, they can live, but for how long?
Until you start spraying fire hoses at the mess.
There's a lot of variables when it comes to that. Obviously, how much physical space that they have, what their physical condition was previous to the event, what injuries they have incurred during the event,
how much rebar is there sticking through your chest right now?
Water would be probably the number one priority. They've had substantial rain down there during the event, so there is a possibility that people have been able to capture water. The food side of things, I mean, people have lasted, one of the fire chiefs had mentioned that in Haiti, they were at day 8 and found someone alive. So there's a multitude of factors that have influence on survivability. So that's factors that they would be taking into consideration right from day 1 of the event. So yeah, it's like I say, it's just so many variables that you kind of take it by event to the next event.
Yeah, I mean, you rush in while others are rushing out. And, in 9/11, it was so chaotic because, fire guys and police are rushing in and going up the stairs trying to get people out. In this situation, floors have compacted onto themselves. So it's not like you can really rush in. Kind of the same in Elliott Lake, where you've got this deck that falls onto a mall. those don't just move out of the way for you guys to go in and rescue. And so does it become a matter of getting your equipment in to chip away where you think you might find somebody using sonar equipment? I mean, how long does it generally take before you guys can spot where a body or a person might be? And then, of course, how long can it take to get them out?
So we have quite a large cache of equipment that we have access to. Currently, Toronto Task Force 3 has what we call DELSAR, which is a listening device. They're a series of microphones that are placed in a strategic area, and then they respond to any noise. It's not specific to human or say physical material, but if we do get something that is of interest, we can start doing triangulation and bring the microphones in closer and closer. That's one technique that we would use. Another method is using cameras. We have an extensive camera system that is reach poles or can be lowered down on cables. We would compromise the concrete with a hole, and then we would lower that camera system in to get an actual visual. It will also give us a prelude to building construction and what type of collapse we're dealing with.
He knows the word. Somebody told him don't compromise concrete. Detection equipment is our canine unit. Currently, we have 4 dogs assigned to the team. They are tended by Toronto Police Services canine unit. So we use dogs extensively. Now, there is 2 types of dogs. There is a live person dog, and then there's obviously a cadaver dog. We only have live person dogs, so these dogs are specifically trained to locate live people. That was my next question. And when they indicate that kind of narrows things down for us as well.
What's it like when your job is to save people's lives and
they smell of a living person, they don't smell of a dead person.
Day 5 or 6, and time is starting to build up, elements of weather, heat, food deprivation, those kinds of things. Adrenaline starting to wear off of those who are buried. But at what
Red Bull doesn't sponsor search and rescue?
That they are really up against all odds on finding anybody alive. And at what point does the search and rescue then turn into a recovery operation? And how do those two change as far as how they're carried out?
So that is something that at a command level is monitored quite closely. So you obviously have to take in what the work environment is for your rescuer. They are working in a very hot, humid environment. Obviously, it's not the best weather with rain involved. You're exactly right. The adrenaline starts to kind of subside. You get exhaustion settling in. You have to watch crew rotation. Is it a 20-minute work cycle? Is it a 2-hour work cycle? Can you push them any further? Starting to find deceased persons in the pile, it kind of plays a negative factor on the morale of the team, et cetera, et cetera. So they're at that point now where they have to start considering the physical and mental capacity of their team members.
I have to think that's going to be a pretty tough call to make at the top, because you move from an operation where you're really delicately picking your way through a scene to deciding, okay, we've got to bring in the heavy equipment, kind of acknowledging that no one's going to be found alive, and that's a totally different operation. That's going to be pretty tough.
Wow, the way your brain works is fucked up.
And where do you draw the line? Like do you give it 2 more days with a possible successful rescue, or is it beyond the point where everything that you have access to with the dogs, with the cameras, with the microphones, with the environment, the temperatures, the actual building construction, the type of collapse, it all starts weighing in now. I believe they're at day 6, is that correct? And so that plays an influence on it. So that's a tough call. I mean, ethically, you have to look at it as well. I mean, where do you draw that line? And that's a very tough decision. At the first, you know you're in rescue mode. There's no question you're going in because the chances of survivability are greater, as they often refer to the golden hour. But as this drags on, this is where the decision making is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, and no question. I mean, like 9/11, some bodies never were recovered. They simply evaporated. In Elliott Lake, you did recover 2 bodies, but there is a very good possibility, I would have to think, in this situation, that some families will never know what happened to their loved ones.
And that's true. But again, not being privy to information or being actually on site and witnessing what they're seeing, that I can't really speculate on what these. Well, I'm hearing on the media that they've had to do DNA sampling, in that the person they've located is unrecognizable or didn't have ID on them. Which a majority of the people, it goes back to your scene size up. A majority of these people would be in their beds, so they wouldn't have wallets on them or any form of identification. So it just increases the task that Florida has on their hands moving on into the investigation.
CSI Miami. Which one's that one?
Well, you guys don't get called in very often, but when you do, it's certainly for the most serious of serious. So I appreciate the insight and what that's like in the decision-making process. I appreciate your perspective from that. So thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you.
He didn't really get into that, did he?
John Davison is part of HUSAR, Heavy Urban Search and Rescue Unit, and also with Toronto Fire, but certainly they're a specially trained operation.
So if this building falls
when
down,
they get called in, it's for the toughest of jobs. So let's
up
hope
the
for some miracles, but be, I guess, mindful that time is now running out. When we come back, we'll get into round 1 of Counterpoint. We got a whole bunch of the day's news to get to, and we will talk about that. Thanks to our friends over at Peatsville. We'll do that.
It's going to be about Canada Day, I guarantee. Then they'll slip in something about vaccines. So they had a piece of the gardener fall off and hit somebody's car, and they had someone from the city get on the radio and say, it's okay, it's not structural concrete. Yeah, because since it's not structural concrete, it won't hurt you when it hits you in the head when you're driving under the road. At some point, this will switch to, not yet, to BBC World Service. Thank you.
401 now clear. New gourmet thin 10-inch charcuterie pizza now just $8.49 at Pizza Pizza.
Bolt counterparts.
Oh, that's the nature documentaries on the radio.
And to get your job done probably in the future. So this is a pre-test, I would say, and to see how good you are at like adjusting yourself to an uncertain environment.
A young white-tailed eagle away Siberia. After a long flight of more than 5,000 kilometers, it's tired and hungry.
Stop it if it's Chinese.
But when the sea is covered in ice and snow, pickings here are slim in the extreme. To make matters worse, this is an immature bird. Strong seagulls are hard to catch, even for experienced stomach urges it on.
Seagulls. Holy fuck.
With a 99.99.
Easy, we help make Sean's Menswear, Toronto's premium men's clothing store, is back. This week, handcrafted Italian suits start at $300. That's the price of 2 hours of our rent. Ties for the cost of 4 hours of our utility bills. And 2 button-down shirts for less than 30 minutes of interest payments on our loans. Come down to Sean's Menswear, because like our business, these deals can't go on forever. Every dollar you spend at a local business extends its life. Buy Toronto Time. Tabia, in support of Toronto neighborhoods.
Fuck's sakes. Say about this eagle again for a minute. Fucking hell.
Ray is unwilling to let it go.
Journalist and former Director of Legislative Affairs for the Ontario PC Party, and Lauren Hogman, who you know with us as our Global News Radio legal expert. Hi, guys.
Well, you used to work for
Happy Taco Tuesday.
Have fun with it. Ontario is further easing restrictions on long-term care homes, and residents will now finally be able to have up to 10 people and indoor visits, 10 people outside, and indoor visits of 2 visitors and 2 caregivers. And this happens July 7th. This was Rod Phillips.
One of the best communicators in all of cabinet. And that's what he apologizes if he made you feel bad about something. But he did strike the right chord, and it'll be really interesting to see what we hear from the other governments. Like Mr. Del Duca was in the previous Liberal government, and he should be apologizing. And Andrea Horvath, she should be.
From an action point of view, and as well, he's coming into it now, you know, hopefully post-pandemic. So it may be easier to get the action that wasn't there before.
They don't give us knives.
Yeah, no kidding. Education Minister Stephen Lecce announcing today that the problem of the tools he'll use to tackle this. But, you know, that is not a lot of money, Kelly, and I got to be honest with you. I don't understand, other than politicking on this issue. We've got hate crimes up in all faiths, certainly in anti-Semitism. Why would they just have it as homophobia, and why not, educate on all hate crimes?
Yeah, I seem to think that $300,000 in our school system, that won't even keep the lights on for a couple.
That's like installing a pencil sharpener.
It really is like installing pencil sharpeners across the system. But you're right. I have no issues with him targeting Islamophobia or anything of that nature, but there's enough hate crimes to go around right now. Why are we focusing on one particular group and such a small amount of money? I mean, I would have been embarrassed to make that announcement.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, man. It is
300,000, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with both of you, and it's and certainly your point is correct about the fact that it would be good if you want to target hate and you want to put that into the schools so the kids can understand it. Do it, but do it right, and do it in all forms of hate. You're absolutely correct, and most certainly fund it properly.
Anti-white.
I mean, what kind of announcement is that in this day and age? Because you're right. I think, did you just say about a pencil sharpener? It's true.
Oh, I'm serious. It's true.
I mean, it's
like $400 apparently. His job in the wake of that little Gulf trip that he took with retired Chief of Defense Staff General Jonathan Vance, who is under military police investigation. This decision was announced today in a memo to the Canadian Armed Force staff. And the acting chief says, quote, I will give him the possibility to redeem himself and show us how to learn, grow, and help the healing process. This Gulf trip happened a couple of weeks ago. Vance is under military police investigation, though, for alleged inappropriate behavior, Kelly. And the commander we're talking about is one of the people looking into the alleged wrongdoing. I mean, does he deserve, like, do these guys get it?
Well, that seems a little tone deaf. To be able to do that. If you're one of the guys who is responsible for investigating, then you know what? Don't hang out with them. Like I get the whole innocent until proven guilty stuff and everything like that, but that doesn't. I mean, that would be like, I don't know. That would be like your judge going out and golfing with you or something.
Hey, you shut up about the golf trips I take with them judges.
I think it's sad to see what's happening with the Canadian military. It really is.
Canada First Defense Strategy.
Because, I mean, I'm from a military family, and I take a lot of pride in our military, and it's really sad to see what's been happening. And this is just another example.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You give someone a second chance. It was just so confoundingly stupid, Lauren. I mean, even if you, like, you're investigating the guy and he asked, do you want to play golf? I don't know, if anyone's caught us. It wasn't like they were at, like, a public course. They were at a military course where everybody would have known them. So either they're really, really stupid or they're completely stupid. I can't figure it out, but I'm not sure if he deserves a second chance.
Well, I don't know, and I hate when they use the words given a chance to redeem himself. yourself. You know what? If you're going to say to yourself,
can't redeem yourself unless you get
some
something
errors are more serious than others. That's just the message here. Just come out and say it and say, look, it was an error, but we put it at a 3 out of 10 error rather than a 7 out of 10. That's how we looked at it. But you start talking about it, a chance to redeem himself, a chance to do this. Like, I think you've now added layers to this that just make exactly as you're saying, Alex, that, you know, why is he given, quote, a second chance? Like, it just, you just come out and say, look, it was an error, fine. You know, we don't think it's an error that he has to now leave, okay? And that's it. But you start putting this language in there, and that's why people start questioning what's going on.
No, we were questioning.
Yeah, he'd be better off saying, look, he's a very strong officer. He did something stupid. We're keeping him because we made this at the top levels. But yeah, just, well, we'll see how he's learned from this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you have to teach someone not to go open with the guy you're investigating, you don't deserve that job.
We're giving him a chance to redeem himself.
And we let golf courses. Apparently, that was the other surprise. Surprise! Yeah, let me pause it there, guys, and when we come back into round two, this is I gotta be honest.
9 degrees Celsius on Monday, an all-time Canadian record.
125-year-old record.
In his first day in the new role, Ontario's top doctor says he doesn't see an early move to step 3 of reopening. 680's Phil Martino has more from Dr. Kieran Moore's first official news conference as Chief Medical Officer of Health, and she joins us live. Phil.
Judy, Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's top doctor, says we all want a safe opening as we move into step 2 tomorrow and into the fall.
Well, this does mean that most Ontarians can get a haircut and are allowed to have family visits or visit their favorite amusement park. It does not yet mean we are ready to forget about the need for physical distancing.
As for moving into step 3 sooner, want it to be shortened. He adds it's up to every Ontarian to keep our community risk and rate of infection low so that we can all open safely. According to Dr. Barbara Yaffe, the Associate Medical Officer of Health, over 4.5 million Ontarians are fully vaccinated. And while there is every reason to be optimistic, the Delta does remain a serious concern because once it gets a foothold, it can spread quickly. Phil Martino, 680 News.
680 News Time 8:35. Emergency crews at the site of the condo collapse in Surfside, Florida have recovered another body from the rubble, bringing the death toll to on the rubble and finding anyone that may still be alive. Surfside Mayor Charles Burkett.
Nobody's giving up hope here. Nobody's stopping. The work goes on full force. We're dedicated to get everyone out of that pile of rubble and reunite them with their families.
Calling the operation a search and rescue. The recovery mission continues despite the fact no one has been found alive since hours after the collapse Thursday. The building crumbled days before a deadline on steep payments for repairs to what had been identified as major structural damage. Coming in focus now, the sister building next to it begins.
This is All News Radio 680 News. So when will Canadians be able to ditch their masks for good?
So all the
Inching towards that, with 77% of the eligible population receiving at least one dose of a vaccine. It's in the trash just yet, noting the Delta variant still poses a risk for a fourth wave.
We do have to be quite cautious. The provinces are just beginning to open up, and we will then see what happens.
Dr. Tam says, can't say exactly when masks will no longer be necessary for indoor public settings like bars and restaurants. Some countries like Israel have been forced to bring back.
Spence Diamonds. Find us in Vaughan, Scarborough, and Mississauga. Find ourselves on
more than $8 billion in economic spending due to the pandemic, and now the back visitors. Our moment Koreshi takes a look. Standing in the lobby of Ripley's Aquarium, Christopher Bloor's voice echoes off the empty corridors of the once busy building. Bloor, the CEO of Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, says the pandemic has been catastrophic.
No wait left. I think. Recalculating. Hey, wow, I love you, man. Just wanted you to know that. Okay. Recalculating. Go left onto King Street. Wait, sorry, that's a stop sign. Recalculating.
You wouldn't trust AI for directions if it were under the influence. So why would you trust yourself to drive? Don't drink and drive. A message from Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
Welcome back to Counterpoint, brought to you by Pizzaville on Global News Radio.
8:38 here as we headed around 2 of Counterpoint, brought to you by our good friends over at Pizzaville. 416-736-3636 or pizzaville.ca. We've got Kelly Harris as well as Lauren Honickman joining us here today. And I don't know what you call this speech. He called it himself a provocative speech in the Senate. And we're talking about independent senator, also known as a liberal appointed senator, Yen Po Wu, who said Canada's not in a position to judge China for its human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims because our country has mistreated indigenous comments. So he's telling the senators to reject a conservative-led motion that would denounce China's genocide against the Uyghur Muslims, arguing that these statements would further damage already strained Canada-China relations. Now, he denied saying any of this, except for, I have a friend who works for someone in the Senate, and so I said, where do I get a copy of his speech? And so I got it, and I listened to the audio. Well, yeah, he did say this. Take a listen.
The fact that there is no version of what is happening in Xinjiang which Canadians can be comfortable with is as much a comment on us as it is a comment on China. We have a view of individual liberties that is embodied in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms that we hold sacred, and which would not today allow our government to make mass arrests on the suspicion of terrorism, force whole communities to attend schools for what we perceive to be their benefit, sterilize women so that they did not burden themselves and society with so-called modern amenities. Except that we did all those things. And we did them throughout our short history as a country, most appallingly to indigenous people.
Paid by the taxpayers of this country, shilling and doing Chinese propaganda in this country. I find it despicable, and this is a guy that Trudeau appointed, and here he is in our Senate.
That's not what he
And
said.
the most incredible thing about this, the most incredible thing about this is what anything he does, if that statement makes any sense. But last week he pushed back on China when China came out and said these things.
Well, there's a first for everything, but yeah, go ahead.
And he was right when he came out and he said, where's China's Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Where's China taking responsibility? And then he said China doesn't even recognize that there's a problem. How can you compare the two? And here he is, this live the same thing. So perhaps the Prime Minister should take those rare, I underline rare words, proper words, and have a talk with that particular senator. That is
Canada
unbelievable.
did do all those things.
Yeah, Kelly. I mean, honestly, I don't know if you can even fire a senator or suspend or censure or I don't know, expel.
No.
But I find it completely reprehensible that this man is allowed to stand in the red chamber and essentially do China's dirty work against his country.
Wow.
The Senate should be abolished, but let's get past that.
Yeah, that's a different argument.
The shocking thing about this is this learned senator appointed by a liberal prime minister who seems to forget that we didn't have a Charter of Rights and Freedom in 1867. That's 1982. And what's interesting is China has actually peeled back on human rights over the past 100 years, where we have been establishing greater human rights over the past 100 years.
The guy wasn't making a point about when the charter was
written. I don't know if he got that directly from the Chinese Communist Party, that speech, or if he called them and said, would it be all right if I say these things on your behalf? Because that is just, I mean, he is enough with this. China is a dictatorship and a rogue regime, the way they treat their Muslim population. That's what they are. I'm sorry, the book's still out on whether or not they caused COVID, and the two Michaels are still in a basement. You know what? How about saying that to that senator? Okay, Senator,
COVID was found in Spain.
Yeah, well, nonetheless, I'm not counting on too much. Do I have time? Do I not have time? I do not have time. I do not have time to get into the next topic, but nonetheless, I wanted to make sure we talked about this senator. I don't have time. Nonetheless, gentlemen, I don't know what the weather's like in your world, but stay dry, keep the power on, and Appreciate your time. By the way, I know you're out now.
Ontario's top doctor, Kieran Moore, says he doesn't believe in shortening the 21-day interval between phased reopenings. And we'll have the latest from Surfside, Florida, where the search and rescue efforts continue for a 6th day. It is not yet a recovery mission. The death toll has risen to 12, with 149 people still unaccounted for.
404 as you make your way through the 407. That's because a few left lanes are blocked here with some ongoing emergency construction and delays from approaching Highway 7. Stand Up to Cancer is making the impossible possible. Tune in Saturday, August 21st.
The second, as the game's only run so far, you can watch the game on Sportsnet.
The game's only run so far. Oh, we don't have anything else. Damn. Fuck.
Global News Radio 640 Toronto Chopper Traffic. This Sunday morning on Your Life, Your Money. Are markets in for a stormy summer? The warm weather usually leads to quiet markets with less money being invested. But will that lack of activity make markets more volatile? Learn more about the financial forecast from the interesting summer ahead when you join Calvin the Money Guy with Chris Creston this Sunday morning at 9. And for advice anytime, go to askkelvin.ca. That's ask, KELVIN.ca.
The new Global TV app now has the best news offering in particle. This detector can catch that change thanks to laser beams traveling inside each arm of the L.
You have a real sensitive measure of the change in the relative length of the arms.
Landry shows off big pieces of new equipment waiting to black holes merging or a couple of neutron stars colliding, and now black holes eating neutron stars.
I found that to be an astonishing speed to mature the field. I think that's been a surprise.
They'll find then. Landry thinks the improvements should let the detector capture a previously undetectable celestial event just about every day. Nell Greenfield's voice, NPR News.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Transportation Safety Board has now taken over the investigation. Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, Devin Dreeshen, issued a statement following the death, saying he mourns the life lost in the line of duty and thanked all the first responders putting themselves in danger to protect Albertans. I'm Jeff Slack.
This is 680 News. North Korea's leader warning of a grave incident in anti-pandemic efforts in the tiny reclusive nation.
South Korea's Yonhap news agency reports North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un said on state media that failures of senior officials in anti-epidemic efforts have caused a, quote, grave incident that poses a threat to the country and its people. It's not clear what the grave incident is or was, but he accused officials of, quote, neglecting their duties in carrying out measures needed to fight the global pandemic, Yonhap said. Mark Remillard, ABC News.
A delegation of Indigenous leaders will head to the Vatican later this year to push for a papal apology for the Catholic Church's role in residential schools.
The Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops says an Indigenous delegation will visit the Vatican in December to meet with Pope Francis and, quote, foster meaningful encounters of dialogue and healing. They say he extended the invitation and is deeply committed to hearing directly from Indigenous people. Calls for the Pope to apologize over the Church's role in residential schools have been growing since hundreds of unmarked graves were discovered at former sites in Saskatchewan and British Columbia, sparking national grief and outrage. Stephanie Taylor, The Canadian Press, Ottawa.
Former Mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, is being investigated for his government lobbying efforts on behalf of Turkish interests.
Sources told ABC News the Justice Department is examining whether Rudy Giuliani went too far in urging the Trump administration to drop criminal charges against a businessman whose case reflected poorly on Turkish President Erdogan, and to extradite a cleric who Erdogan accused of inciting a coup. The civil inquiry is separate from the criminal investigation into Giuliani's activities in Ukraine, where prosecutors have said he tried to dig up political dirt on Joe Biden, while simultaneously urging the Trump administration to oust then Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. Giuliani has denied wrongdoing. Aaron Katursky, ABC News, New York.
In 60 seconds, a check on traffic, and we'll have your extended forecast.
This is 680 News. Finding great candidates.
See, because the whole day I thought this was...
am so tired of this narrative, and that is why I was elated to read Dori Shafrir's new book, Thanks for Waiting.
School, like, out of place with these tweets. These tweets just didn't seem...
So they're both so desperate.
One thing I will say, because the whole day I thought this was stupid and a massive waste of time, but we wouldn't have been able to do this, like this back and forth wouldn't have existed with Trump in office. Nothing against it, but he might have just ignored the tweet. But it just...
And a common thread, while they have differences, is the importance of hair. And your hair is considered a physical manifestation of your spirit. So you can't just cut it off and let it fall to the ground. You have to burn it so that it goes back up into the air and back up to the spirit. You know, I don't know what Mr. Rizzo did with his ponytail, because he had to cut his hair short. I just think it's such a bad look now.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Even then, it always makes you question the Liberals' PR team, because this would have been something that would have been a very quick meeting. Like, hey, how are the optics on this? It doesn't vibe right. It doesn't look right. Let's not do this. But you got to remember,
at that time, Rizzo was a bit of a bad boy. You know, he was struggling a bit. He had some real issues with substance abuse and such, and there had been trouble swirling around him. So I don't think people were as understanding or as empathetic to him. But he has spent the last 5 or 6 years, certainly 10 years, fixing his life. He went into rehab. He got help. He's now
cleaned himself
a child away. And I just think, yeah, that wouldn't fly.
Like if any listeners see the picture, you'll see what we mean right away. It's just, no matter if it was fun, because there is the backstory to it. Let's just pretend this was friendly. That still makes the PR look really, really, really bad. This is around this time was when Trudeau was still, well, it was hidden, but he was still parading. That will actually be surgically attached to 2 of your teeth and only allow you to open your mouth about 2 millimeters, which will allow you to breathe and speak normally, according to this professor, but will only allow you to have a liquid diet. So obviously this has gained as much backlash and criticism as you would have expected. The dental
for weight loss? I mean, it's a pretty extreme diet.
And it doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's the point. People are calling it offensive and short-sighted, and generally speaking, just all around the job. There's multiple ways to attack the growing issue of obesity, but to literally wire people's mouths shut and only allow a 2 millimeter opening and saying that you'll be fine, you'll breathe and speak normally, no one will notice. Like, all of that.
By the way, well, I was gonna say,
like it's just one of those solutions that no one really asked for,
Solution in quest of a problem. Nonetheless, dental slim diet control, there we be. When we come back, we will talk interesting stats coming in on collateral damage in this pandemic of who's actually dying, not of COVID, but the thousands of Canadians who have died because of COVID and the fact that they've been ignored. We'll talk about that coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. Stay tuned, your news at the top.